Traveling to Consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
What is up, conscious monkeys? Welcome to another episode of Traveling to Consciousness. I am your host, Clayton. Today's guest is known for her trance channeling. With her channeling abilities, she has written books and courses. Those courses range from everything from an abundance accelerator to business mentorships to how to become a certified high 70 energy healer. I honestly have no idea what that is. I barely know if I even pronounced that right.
You did well.
Thank you. But that's why we've got her here today to, give me those words of encouragement.
Yeah.
amongst amongst other things. So, conscious monkeys, welcome to the show, Christina, the Channel Rice. Christina, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. That's my middle name is the Channel.
I figured. It was like assigned at birth, right?
Yeah, it was. So it was written in the stars. I had no other choice.
Well, then, I think that's the best place to start is like, what is a channel and how did you know when you were a channel?
Yeah. The term channeling, I feel, has a loose definition and it really depends who you're talking to. And so I don't really get too attached to definitions. I think it's just more important that we know what we're talking about. So channeling to me from a broader perspective is that state of flow that we all access in different ways. You might access it here when you're podcasting. An artist might access it when they're in the flow, creating a painting or any type of piece of artwork, or you see somebody up on stage speaking. Like whenever we are in that flow state, you see professional basketball player just like doing their thing, right? You can tell when someone's in flow. And to me, that's all channeling. It's when that thing that's bigger than us, it's our truest frequency, it's source itself moving through us, and we're just totally in that flow state. Like that to me is channeling, where we're putting our ego and our mind aside for a second and just letting that bigger thing move through us. So that is one broader definition. And then to get more spiritual, channeling to me is just communication with any, I'll say, non-physical entity, and communicating with, I would include, past loved ones or animal communication, really connecting to your higher self, channeling your higher self, connecting to interdimensional beings or, any non-physical entity, channeling any type of information from the divine, however you want to see it. And then there are different types of channeling within that. So I consider all intuitive work, energy work, like channeling. And then I also trance channel, which is a specific type of channeling, where the entities can use my voice or my hands to bring it through. And I'm very much kind of stepped aside. So those are different types of channeling, I would say. So it just depends on context. And how did I know that I was a channel? Well, funny story. I was really tapped in as a kid, but I did not realize that was what was going on, as most kids are, right? Kids are really open and super intuitive. And I think a lot of us have that experience. And I very much shut that down, went through my whole life not knowing that I was psychic or intuitive. And it was through my journey with chronic illness that kind of on the other side of that, or through that, I found energy work and I saw my first psychic. My FMD at the time encouraged me to check it out, and I was at the point where I would try anything. And what's
an FMD, real quick?
Functional medicine doctor.
Okay.
So my doctor, basically, he told me, you should check out this intuitive. She's incredible. And I was just, I was at a place personally where I was open to trying anything, but also I've always been like that. I've always been just a very open kind of person. There's really nothing you could tell me that I would think is weird at all. I've always been like that. So, and I was not into spirituality. I grew up Catholic, and then I was like, I hate this. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm atheist, but I'm not atheist. I don't know what I am. I'm just nothing. I just kind of disconnected from spirituality or anything there. Is very not into religion. anyway, so I went to saw this intuitive, and she really shifted my life and just kind of set off this cascade of spiritual events for me. And I just started thinking, well, I'll follow the signs. And I had a dream to become an energy healer. So I did. And through my work as an energy healer, my gifts just turned on really strongly. And I was just experimenting with it. And I realized, wow, every single thing I'm saying to people is true. And it was like scarily accurate, like all the dates and the names. And it was just through, sharing that information, what I was getting as I was doing energy work, that I realized, oh, I'm like pretty spot on. And all of the information I was getting from kind of that side of things helped me a lot with healing my body. I implemented what I was learning and getting into my business, and it really blew up. And I just found that state of flow in my life. And there hit a point where I was in the nutrition space for a while, and then I shifted into business coaching, and I really kind of got knocked on my ass by my spirit guides. And they're like, you need to stop. Like, you need to just do the whole spiritual thing. It was like I was in the closet about how psychic I was. And my energy healing practice was always something in the background for me. And it was like this in-person thing, but I never talked about it on my platform publicly, really. So I hit a point where I was like, okay, I just gotta go all in on this, and I did, and that was probably like 2 years ago when I was like publicly, oh, I'm going all spiritual now, everybody. So yeah,
Full send.
mm-hmm. Full send.
So there's a lot of interesting things there in your story that I'd love to parse out. Starting with, are you comfortable with like going into the illness? I guess you don't. It's okay if you don't be specific about what it was.
Oh, I'll be as specific as you want. I'm
Okay.
shameless. You can get all the nitty gritty details about my body, my life, all on my podcast.
All right. That's good to know then. uh,
Yeah.
which, first of all, congrats on your podcast, because you're at like 520 episodes or something, and you
Yeah,
release them
thank
like
you.
twice a week. That's great. I mean, seeing another podcaster do that, it's like, to me, I'm at, I think, like 30 or something, and to think
Mhm.
500, I'm like, shit, like that's commitment.
It's been a huge piece of my journey. It's so much of what made me me, and it was like a verbal diary for me. When I started that podcast, I had no idea it was going to be something I was with forever. Well, not forever, but for this long, I will say, for this long. And I started that show when I was in college and when I was going through all this crazy shit, and it's been with me through every transition in my life, and my business, my personal life, my health. And it's been so cool to have a community of people that really have been there since the beginning, and a lot of those people know me better than people who think they know me in real life.
Air quotes.
So yeah, it's been so incredible, and just the opportunity to have so many life-changing conversations that have shifted me as a person, and getting to meet so many cool people. And one of the reasons why I wanted to start podcasting was because I was always really insecure about my speech, and it was me jumping into that fear and just saying screw it.
Good
If
for
I'm
you.
afraid of it, I need to just face it head on and get really used to it. And yeah, it really helped me build a lot of confidence in myself. And yeah, just so many of those conversations that I've had changed my life. And I've met a lot of my closest friends through podcasting, people who are family to me now. It was a podcast that brought us together. So I'm really grateful for the medium, and I'm big fan of it above really all other platforms. But it was cool because it definitely chronicled all of my health struggles. And I had a lot of different health issues growing up that I just thought were normal. And I struggled a lot with my mental health. That was one thing I did recognize. So I had really extreme anxiety and depression for a long time. And I had other symptoms that I just thought were normal, and I think a lot of people still think they're normal. But for me, the symptoms were I had really bad acne, and my periods were insane. And really, it was digestive problems that were like horrible, horrible digestive problems. I mean, I can get as TMI as you want, but like it was bad. So, I mean, when I was a senior in high school, I got mono, and I had mono for almost 2 years. So I had a chronic case of mono, and that definitely like affected my body. And after that, I started to kind of get better, but my depression got really bad, and I fell into like binge eating, and I was like, my alcohol consumption was really, really bad again. And I was just really depressed. I was at a really low state. And after that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get healthy. And I started to learn more about nutrition, and it was all like bullshit nutrition. It wasn't anything real. I was just, starting to, and I thought, oh,
There's a lot of that
I'm
out there.
feeling, yeah, I'm feeling way better. So it was like a step in the right direction. I wasn't like living off McDonald's anymore as I was. um, so it was a shift in the right direction. And then what happened was I came to San Diego. I was living in LA, and I I don't know, I was like on a high. Everything was great, and then I had some froyo that really just set me off, and I was violently ill for about a week. And it was at the end of that, where my body just kind of stopped working. And what I mean by that is my body stopped digesting food. So I lost about 50 pounds in 2 to 3 months.
Wow.
I didn't have 50 pounds to lose, and so I was just losing weight really rapidly. And uh, when you're that malnourished, your organs start to shut down. And what that looked like was I was seeing a lot of different doctors and specialists. And I ended up having to drop out of school because I was spending so much time at the doctors. I was pretty much from 8 to 5 every day going to see different people. And I was the mystery case, and I was getting all this testing done. And I was eating 10, 12,000 calories a day and just continuing to drop weight. And, at my lowest, I was 70 pounds and I was 6% body fat. And I was so scared. I was so scared because I just felt completely out of control. Like, no matter how much I ate and how hard I tried, because I was giving it my all, I was seeing everybody, I was willing to do anything. My body just still was shutting down. And that's a really scary place to be when you're 20 years old and everybody around you is just like, worried about stupid shit, and it really put my life into perspective for me. And, I was very much facing like, I could die. I could die. Like things were starting to shut down, and the doctors were telling me that. And at the same time, I lost a lot of relationships in my life. A lot of people just kind of didn't want to talk to me anymore. I had people sending pictures out about me. I had like random news articles written about. It was like it was really hard. It was really hard. I felt really isolated and alone.
At this
And
at this
yeah.
point, so I can build like kind of a mental image. What
Mhm.
Because like in my experience, I've kind of noticed that whenever I've had physical ailments myself, nothing
Mhm.
extreme is what you're saying, but I've always noticed that there's usually like some environmental factor, whether it's friends or family who are casting judgment, or if it's something with my job. So I'm curious, like what your environment looked like during this time, and if I mean, maybe we're going to get to the cliff part where it shifts around.
Mhm.
But I'm curious what your environment at least looked like, during this, I guess it would have been high school to college-ish time frame.
Like before it got bad, or like while it was at its worst?
I mean, I guess both. I guess I'm trying to figure out like what the issue is from a spiritual perspective
I
as we're
mean,
going
from a
through this.
spiritual perspective, I wanted to disappear.
You just felt
And
like it was
I
in
didn't want
in
to I didn't want to be on the planet. Like I wanted to disappear. I didn't want to be on the planet. And so my body did. It like was shriveling. It was shutting down, you
and
know.
was there something that wanted you to feel that way? Because like was it a chicken or the egg situation where
I I was obsessed from the time I would say probably 11, 12 on with why am I here? Like, I am not doing this bullshit thing of like, I wake up, I go to school, I talk to people about stupid shit, I go to volleyball practice, I come home, I do my homework, and I go to sleep and I do it again. Like, I'm like, this sucks. And then I get to that started middle school, and then I get to high school, same shit. Get to college, same
Mm.
shit. And I thought, and I kept telling myself to get through each phase, just get through this, just get through middle school, just get through high school, just get through college. And then it was when I hit college that I thought, it's not going to get better. Like I was like, I was living my entire life for other people and to try and be perfect and to do this. I had felt a lot of pressure. I was the smart one. I was perfect Christina. You're going to be the first doctor. You're going to be the first lawyer, right? I like literally have never gotten an A- in my life. In my life. Like
Wow.
I was like all that was what I was good at, was being the smart one and running the extracurriculars and being the leader. Like I was very much that kind of like little Miss Perfect energy. And I felt a lot of that pressure. And I always felt like people, I felt at the time that people were always like putting me on a pedestal and waiting for the moment to take me down. And I never wanted to be on the pedestal. Uh, and anytime I did make a mistake or I wasn't perfect, it was shoved in my face. Like it was shoved in
Really?
my face, and so I felt a lot of that pressure, and I just could feel the misalignment in my system. And I was thinking, I had this whole track for my life set out of like whatever version of success like was everybody else said was successful, right? And I hit that point where I thought like, when is it going to get better? I'm just going to get into some job, some fancy career, and I'm already aligned, and everybody's going to tell me I'm amazing and I'm going to hate my life. And I'm like, what's the point of it? Like, what's the point of being here? And I've always been like that. And I've always had that thought. And I've been to like many therapists in my life, and was just kind of told to shut up and get over it. Here's an
Damn.
antidepressant. And when really didn't have anybody I could talk to who got it. My parents really didn't know what to do with me. And I tried to talk to teachers, and I talked to different therapists and psychiatrists. And it was kind of just like, if you just take this antidepressant, you'll feel better. I'm like, no, I won't. That's not getting to the root of the problem. I was like, no, I need to understand why we're here. Like, I need to understand what the point of my life is, And I think that it's also very intimidating when an 11-year-old is asking an adult this, and that adult doesn't even know the answer to that question. And I'm probably triggering the fuck out of them because they're realizing I don't like my life either. Right.
Right.
So that was just kind of like my vibe going through it,
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of transition, a lot of just feeling lonely in a crowded room. I always felt really lonely. I always felt very different. And there was also the feeling of everybody else's stuff all the time, which I didn't know at the time. I didn't understand how empathic I was. I always felt things really, really deeply. And I always knew a lot of what was going on. Like I I've always been that person that, I speak my truth, and I speak what I see. And especially when I was young, I could tell when someone was lying to me, and I would be like, you're lying. And an adult doesn't like to hear that
Of
from a
course.
child, right? And I've just always kind of been like that. So yeah, through I really believe a big part of how I manifested that initial part of the illness was because I was desperately asking like to find my purpose. And it was only through that I did, and in the middle of it, I didn't realize it. Right. But looking back, like it just made me who I was in so many ways, and who I am in so many ways. And it was, through that there hit a point where I was just at my lowest and I felt so alone. And there was like a night where I was like, I thought I was going to commit suicide. And I sat there and I was like, you know what? No one's going to save me. Like, I'm actually sitting here waiting for someone to save me. Like, I'm sitting here waiting for someone else to figure it out for me. I'm waiting for someone else to care about me, in like the way that I think I need them to care about me. Like, I'm like, I need to stop waiting for someone to save me and just actually do this myself. And it lit a fire under my ass. And the next day I woke up and I'm like, I'm figuring this out. And so that's when I became obsessed with nutrition and like holistic wellness, and I started meditating and practicing more mindfulness, and I got really into like it was the nutrition and kind of biohacking and lifestyle shifts that I started going into. And through that I started to be able to put weight back on. I was healing my gut, I was healing my body. And when I kind of like re-entered life, I would say it was such a blessing because I had such a different perspective, like moving through the world, where I would get stressed out about everything before. Everything seemed like this life or death situation. And when you actually like face that, you don't need to get stressed out about things anymore so much, so it was really great for me in shifting my perspective on like how I move through the world. And I was way less stressed out in general because I just cared about my joy and being happy. And I didn't put the same pressure on myself, and I just really prioritized like what's lighting me up, and so it was through that I started I had already started my blog, and that is also when I started my podcast, kind of on the other side of that leg of it. I had some really amazing jobs that I just loved, and I spent more of my time there than school, and I started just making a lot more friends in the health and wellness space, and I just really found people that aligned with me. I found just the more I publicly shared my own story and really just shared myself and who I was, that I found a lot of people that were like really resonated with me, and met some of my best friends like to this day, and so I kind of got out of the danger zone there. And then like as time went on, my health would go like it was good and then it would get bad again. And it just kept being this up and down thing. And that continued for a while. And it was when what it ended up being, just for people listening, like different diagnoses. I mean, I had candida overgrowth, I had SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, I had parasites, I had hypothyroidism, I had heavy metals toxicity, I had mold illness, I had Lyme disease, I had celiac. Well, I have celiac, whatever. I don't really identify with it, but whatever. And the kind of next wave that was heavy for me was the heavy metals, but really the mold and the Lyme. And that kind of hit a second wave of like, oh shit, I need to shut my whole life down again. In between there, I had really bad adrenal fatigue. Like I really burnt myself down, really burnt myself out, whatever term you want to use, HPA
Same thing.
axis dysfunction. I think we get what we're talking about. So I went through a couple periods where I had to kind of shut down my whole life again and like recalibrate, because I kept re-entering my life and like getting overly excited and doing too much. And so I kind of had to relearn my balance with how hard I was working, I would say. But that's what drove me to figuring out, like with my business as an entrepreneur, how can I make more money and spend less time working? And it was really when I had Lyme disease, that like when I was at my worst there, that I cracked the code with my business, where I really shifted from like struggling for six figures to hitting my first $1 million year like very quickly. And it was a total energetic thing. And it was like, I got to figure this out. Like, I fully believe I can work less and make way more money. And I did. And I cracked the code, and I wouldn't have been pushed to do that without my Lyme and my mold, because I mean, that took up my whole life, and I kind of started going the traditional route, treating that. And I did some things that, were more logistic, but I hit after maybe like 2 weeks of taking a lot of pills, I was like, I really have pill fatigue. I don't want to do this anymore. At this point, I had been on different protocols for my health for years. And because of my podcast and a lot of the friends I had the opportunity to have access to a lot of the best practitioners in the world, and I was always the mystery case. And I was the mystery case to the person that uh, dealt with the mystery cases, and
Huh.
that I think for some people can leave you feeling really defeated. And I had a lot of moments of defeat, but I have this incessant hope. It doesn't seem to go away. And I'm just very determined, and I fully believe like I can create what I want, even if it takes me some time, and when I kind of hit that point with the Lyme and the mold, I was like, I think if I take one more pill, I'm going to combust. Like, this has been my life for so long. And so I was like, you know what, screw it. I want to do this like the full, like, energetic neural reprogramming route. And so I really focused on, I did a few logistic things, but really where I was spending my time in terms of healing was energy work. Like, it was really energy work and neural reprogramming. And um, I, when I started that, I feel like it probably took me about 6 months to really completely get my life back. Um, and then maybe like another year or two just for my body to like, I don't know, to feel like myself again, I guess, because there's just a lot of residual effects of that. But, I was like bedridden. I couldn't get up. I would have days or weeks where I like literally couldn't see. Like my vision was gone. It was
Wow.
bad, So Yeah, I that's kind of been the overall journey, and learned a lot in it. And for me, working at, because I worked as a nutritionist for a while, and I was that person that worked with the mystery cases, worked with the chronic cases, because that was my history, and when you work with that kind of client, like, it's not like their diet's already squeaky clean, right? They're already on this supplement protocol. At that point, it's a lot about, there are a lot of like s- simple mistakes that people make with supplement protocols, things that are overlooked. There's a lot you can do. Like I can really geek out over nutrition and make some really interesting shifts there to like support the body. And so you can get minute like that, but I just find for most of those people, the thing that moved the needle was when we really focused on the energy work, and when we really did a lot of the, trauma clearing. But my process for that personally is through energy work. So that that really kind of informed like my practice, my own story, and people were getting incredible results. And that was another big piece of how my practice like really blew up pretty quickly. And it was all about energetics, and it was working so well with health. Figured might as well do it with business. And the proof is in the pudding, I say. So when people, I had a lot of people tell me I was crazy the whole time, and all the stuff that I stepped into, because a lot of people who knew me the first like 20 years of my life, like, they're like, who are you? I'm such a different person. But
Love that.
anybody who's ever like made fun of me, I'm like, they're also the same people asking me for help now, So
Sure. Well, when people make fun of you, and this is stuff I've realized throughout my life, is it's usually an insecurity on their part, right? Because
totally.
I mean, especially you as an empath, and I don't know where I'm at on the empath scale, but there's a level of like, when you're able to see like what like there's levels to this where if I'm insecure about something about myself, like I'll seek it out in other people to see if they have that as well. And then
Mhm.
it becomes a comparison game within myself. And then the next level to that is that that someone else is so insecure that they have to actually go out of their way to say something to you about it. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
there's another level to the insecurity almost. And it's crazy how it kind of, builds on itself in a sense of, where someone is willing to go out and actually say something to you to make fun of you or, to that
Oh,
extent.
totally. I mean, it's just like you have compassion, right? It's like, what must a person believe about themselves to take time out of their day to say something negative to somebody? I always think that, because I'm like, I can never like imagine doing that. Like, I mean, there are things that I have maybe negative comments to say, and I'm like, I am just like, oh, is that really true though? And I would never like sit there and type it out on a computer. It's more, that's about me, right? When that comes up, it's like, oh, that's pointing to something within me. Um, so I can't really imagine like taking time out of your day to like say something negative to somebody when it's not really about them. I feel the same way about, I think about this a lot with the word intimidating. I think it's really interesting when people call people intimidating, because I'm like, the only people who call people intimidating are people who are insecure, is how I see it. Um, because like, if you're actually confident and secure, somebody's not intimidating, right? They might be expansive, right? Or like there's some other term, but I think about that a lot with the word intimidating, because I get called that a lot.
Really? You seem so
people
bubbly though.
people tell me I'm intimidating all the time.
Really?
Um,
That's interesting.
yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really funny. I'm like, I'm not I'm like, I don't, and I think about that. I'm like, who do I think is intimidating? And I'm like, honestly, I don't think people are like, I'm don't think people are intimidating. And that's one of the things that's got me really far in business. And I have a lot of friends who have told me, they're like, one of the things we like about you is that you never seem intimidated. And most people like act like they're intimidated. I'm like, why would I be intimidated by you? People are just people, and everybody has their stuff. Like, we all have our stuff. And just me reflecting on like, well, why is it that I don't think people are intimidating? I'm like, honestly, like, I mean, I have my flaws and I have my insecurities, but at my core, I'm like very confident in myself, and that has been built over time by me showing up for myself. That confidence is from a place of I have proven to myself again and again that I keep promises to myself and that I'm there for myself. You know, it was through really that health journey and the journey for me with building my business and my podcast that I showed up for myself. You know, and that built my confidence. And so like at my core, I do have that because I know I can trust myself. I like if there's one thing I will bet on, it's me always. And that was a relationship that had to be built, you know, but I feel like that word intimidating also is related to the insecurity piece as well.
The way it kind of strikes me, and it's kind of in the way you said it, is like it's not that anybody else is ever intimidating. It's just that you're intimidated by them, which
Yeah.
makes them intimidating. It's not, and this is kind of like what struck me when you were saying that, which I think is pretty interesting. I've never thought about it that way before.
Yeah. Well, I just think about it because I get called it. You know,
Oh yeah.
it's like in those games where it's like, what are three words you would use to describe Christina? And people are like intimidating. I'm like, that's not a character trait of me. That is like your perception of me, because I maybe am doing something that you're afraid to do, but you could do it. You know, or like whatever that is. Most people use that word because like I'm just very honest. I'm very direct. I'm very blunt. I'm very honest. I've always been like that.
I'm right there
And
with you.
you know, people like that scares people because and people will avoid me because of this because it's like you can't bullshit me. Like I will literally say I'm like you're full of shit. You know what I mean? Like with love, you're full
Yeah,
of shit.
you can see behind the
Uh
curtain.
yeah, and for people who are afraid to see the truth of themselves, or like where people who are committed to living in their own illusions because they're afraid of their own truth, like they don't want to be around somebody that's going to see right through the bullshit. So,
Well, you're
I don't
exposing
know.
them. You're exposing them to themselves, and that's not comfortable for them to see, right?
Yeah,
You're like, hey,
yeah,
here's what you
but
actually look like, and they're like, I don't want to see that.
it's my love language. I always say honesty is my love language. So it's like you either can receive that or maybe we shouldn't hang out.
Well, it's interesting how you put it too, because probably for the first, I don't know, 25-ish years of my life, I was kind of like you, where I was very blunt about things, yet I didn't have that extra level of, like, let's say, compassion or love on the end of it. It was kind of just like, hey, here's how it is, like, take it or leave it. And maybe coming from more masculine energy, or, a male, it comes across a little bit more, forceful, possibly also intimidating. And so that was something in the last probably 3 years of my life I've been learning how to try to balance, where it's like, all right, I'm not going to just like let your shit slide, and I'm still going to call you out on it, but I need to like add this layer of compassion or love or empathy on top of it.
Mm. It's so interesting you say that because I feel like as as a female, that's one of the things I bumped up against because it's like there are things I will say that I'm literally just relaying what happened, for example, and people will get upset. And I was having this conversation with one of my friends earlier. She's like, Christina, the things that you say that upset people, if a guy said it, nobody would think twice about it. But like because they're not
Hmm.
expecting it from you, people get like very triggered. And I do feel like that quite often, honestly. Like I feel like there are a lot of things I say or the way I put things where I'm like, you know what? If Gary Vee said the same shit, no one would get it mad at him,
Interesting.
you know?
It could
So,
be. So here's a couple things that are coming through my mind. Number one would be the assumption, right? Maybe it's there's a feminine, female. I can lie to her and she's not going to call me out on it, because I feel like on average, women tend to play this like, how would you describe it? I'm trying to say it without being condescending, but like a a more passive aggressive type of style of communication,
yeah.
whereas
Mhm.
males, are more into the physical realm of, okay, we have testosterone, we're bigger, like, here's how it is, don't talk back, or physical violence could ensue. I mean,
Mhm.
especially if it's a, let's say, an untamed male. um
Yeah, well, it's like the masculine is a direct energy. It's masculine energy in itself is direct. It is penetrating, right?
right.
Um, and the feminine is more flowy. It's softer, right? It's intuitive. And so there's like that, but there's that balance of masculine and feminine within all of us. And so, yeah, I think it is feeding into okay, I can expect it here. Like I can expect that kind of direct, that more direct energy. But then maybe it's you're not expecting that from me. which is,
Right.
I mean, I love it, but
Well, and maybe, I mean, and maybe to your point, like I was even describing at the beginning of this, and even so now, like you have more of bubbly energy. And so if you make this quick pivot towards, direct, sharp, male, masculine, not male, but masculine energy, it's going to throw me back a little bit where it's like, whoa, where did that come from? Like Christina's kind
mm.
of just more like happy go lucky, it's, and then
Well,
you
so isn't that
pivot.
interesting? Can I not be bubbly but also very direct? Like I
No,
think if there is one thing to describe my personality, it's direct. That's like probably my main trait.
I'm not I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying that it shifts people, right? Because
Yeah.
because the way that humans tend to be is if we're not in the present moment, we create these like pseudo people around the other person. Like it's like, say you and I had a say the people you knew 20 years ago, for instance. They already cultivated who Christina is. She is this girl from high school. She's not changing. This is who she is. Now they come back 20 years later and they're like, who the hell are you? You're a new
Mhm.
person. It's like, well, you're not kind of giving me a chance to be new. You're assuming that I'm the
Mhm.
same person I was 20 years ago. Meanwhile, and that's an extreme example. Meanwhile, on a, moment to moment level, it's like, I'm not the same person as I was when we started this podcast, just merely from listening to your story. And so it's that ability to, and this is where it comes to being present or being in the now, it's like we're ever changing creatures and we need to almost appreciate people in such sense. Otherwise we miss out on kind of the mysticism of the human experience.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I totally agree, and I also think, I mean, I'll say from my experience, my directness and my personality has been, I mean, I've been like that since I came out of the womb. Like I've always just been very direct. I feel that there is this deeper programming within society where people have decided that being loving is to keep your mouth shut. To be loving is not being direct. And when you're direct, you're mean. When you're direct, you're a bitch. Like that has been a deeper programming really on a larger level to keep us quiet, because you don't speak up
Mm,
against authority. You don't speak up against the bullshit you see, right? Because we don't want the patriarchy to crumble. That's really the deeper program that has been created. And so a lot of people, when they are met with a very direct energy, when someone is, I mean, quite simply, like this can occur if you're like, no, literally what happened? Like, I got out of the car, I saw you, and then you handed me that. It could be like that logistic. People are so used to illusions. They're so used to lying to themselves. They're so used to being lied to. That's become the normalized vibration. And so to be
right.
met with something that is of truth is triggering.
Right. Well, and this is something I even touched on with the last person, or maybe it was the last interview before you, maybe two before you, but he's talking about how he has created like technological devices, um, through using like the astral realm to actually help people's bodies become in alignment with their true frequency to take away all this distortion of technology and everything around us. And he says that that's in a sense triggering to people because although this is your true nature, it's so foreign to you that you're like, this isn't comfortable. I got to get away. Like I'm out. Like I'm done.
100%, right? Because it's like, I mean, we lean into what we're comfortable with. It's not necessarily what's for our highest and best, and that's the difficult part about like alignment work, or really, we can take something that sounds fluffy like manifestation. Manifestation is about authenticity. Authenticity is about honoring your truth. And to honor your truth, you're going to have to get really real with yourself about all of those friends you're friends with just out of convenience, all of those friends you're friends with where you don't actually have anything in common, right? That relationship you're in that honestly isn't really serving you, but you're afraid that you're never going to find anything better, right? That job that
Hmm.
you're in that you're telling yourself, I can get by, it's not the best, but I'm fine. It's like you hate it. Like your body is screaming at you, get out. And people are afraid to admit that to themselves because they're afraid to make a change. They're afraid to change, right? And so they're creating their own torture because they're choosing what feels like comfort right now, but big picture, like, is the most painful thing you can do, right? Because we're so afraid of releasing things, but releasing things is the only way to raise your frequency.
Yeah. I mean, you're hitting a lot of core lessons I've learned in the last year or two with, quitting, letting go energy, quitting my job. And I blanked. Someone knocked me out. Have you seen that movie Soul where the chick like
Yeah.
is she's throwing the rock at people. I
Yeah.
feel like I just got
Yeah.
hit.
Well, you left your job, and were you afraid to leave your job?
Oh yeah, a lot of fear was kind of coming over it, and it's that you said something that was what were you saying about what did you quit something, or you were saying that people are afraid? Oh, comfortable. The idea
Yeah.
of comfortable is so first of all, we could probably do an entire podcast just on the idea of comfortable, because what you identify as being comfortable is such a fascinating thing, because it's
It's not really comfortable.
yeah, well, if you're not in a healthy place, but then you get to define what's healthy, and people can define what's healthy and comfortable as being toxic, right? Like if victim mentality, for instance, is comfortable and you don't see it as unhealthy, then it's like, okay, I'm just going to stay here and not change it.
hmm Or it's like this is with relationships, for example. If you look at like attraction, people are attracted to what is familiar to them, right?
Right.
Because that's comfortable, they're used to it. And so you know what that looks like? That looks like attracting in that like your toxic ex-partner because you're used to that frequency and it's familiar, right? Or it's your like somebody like your parents, right? Because you're used to it, but then you're recreating those patterns in the relationship. And so that's like, I think that's something really important. I always tell people with dating, because that's one of the, main things people are looking for is love. And
Right.
um, most people, it's like they think they're just going to know. And the thing is, my perspective is that you if you've done enough vibrational work where you are very aligned with your truth and your authentic frequency, you do know instantaneously. If you are still in illusions and you haven't actually gotten to that point, you will not know. And that person you probably will not like at the beginning. And so, usually, like the right person for most people is the person you're not expecting. It's like the person that comes out of left field. It's like, you're not usually my type. Of course, you're not your type because everybody who you dated before didn't work out. There's a reason why, and I think that's really important for people to think about. And I always, the guides always say, like, meet everybody consciously. And what that means is don't overlook anybody, because what we do is, we're just like kind of scanning for what feels familiar, really is what it is, right? And what's familiar, though, if we're trying to shift patterns in our lives or shift energy, and we want to make that shift, we're going to have to go into a new dynamic, a new vibration. So it's not going to be the familiar vibration. And so when you think about, what you're attracted to, or you meet somebody and you make a snap judgment of like, oh, I don't really like them. Why don't you like them? Because you're feeling the vibrational gap. But what if it's higher? Or what if there's an opportunity there? What if they're mirroring something for you and you're getting super triggered? But like that's where the expansion is. And so that's something that I always try to, just keep in mind for myself of as I'm moving through the world. I mean, you never know who's going to walk into your life and be the most important person in your life. You never know who's going to walk in and completely shift the trajectory of your life, even if it was through one conversation, whether they're there for 5 minutes or they're there for the next 50 years. You never know who's going to walk in and change everything. I mean, I have sat down at restaurants and had a 5-minute conversation with somebody before, and it's changed my life, and so people can come in all kinds of ways, but when we move through the world really unconsciously, like we're just unaware, it's like we're robots, we're just going off of automatic processing. I'm walking here, I'm doing this. You don't pay attention to people and you miss it, and so we're co-creating. We need to be aware. And especially if you're looking to attract in any type of new opportunity, whether that be a friendship, a romantic partner, a business opportunity, meet people consciously, right? Just be open and see, is there anything here for me? And maybe there is not, but maybe there is. And if you're not aware, you could walk right past that person.
Yeah. I mean, and two things are kind of screaming at me. One with the business opportunity, which is kind of like in the scam realm, because if you're like just
Mm.
super open, then you're more perceived to scams. And that's something I've experienced lately. But something that actually might touch more people with the idea of love is there's a common question that we always see in society with along the lines of, do you believe in love at first sight? And this was something that I have been contemplating for a while. And, for the longest time, I was kind of on the side of no. And then I was, well, actually, probably with the whole idea of like Disney Channel and like the Disney effect is what I call it, falling in
Mm-hmm.
love within 2 hours. I was on the side of like, oh, yeah, like love at first sight, of course. Like, I totally believe in that. And then it got shifted back to no, that's not real. And then parents reinforced that because it's like, oh, you got to get to know somebody. You got to do X, Y, and Z before you actually know them. But now even as you sounds like you're repeating it as well, where now it's been shifting back where it's like, well, if I truly know my vibrational signature that I'm sending throughout the universe, I know exactly what I'm looking for in a romantic partner. If that person were to show up on my front lawn the next day, I should be able to feel that vibrational frequency of, oh, this is her.
Mm-hmm. It's a topic that I am. Well, I'll just go down the relationship route unless you want me to
Yeah.
go to the scammers first. Do you have
We'll
it? I
do the
can go either
relationship.
way.
We'll come back to
Uh,
scammers.
I'm really into this right now because the book I'm working on right now is about love and relationships. So the last book I channeled was about manifestation, and this is like the next one in that series, and it's about love and relationships and different types of like connections in relationship, soulmates, karmic soulmates, twin flames, like friendships. It's just like all about relationship. And I have been very curious to see what's coming through. And the way I write these books is I basically do just 2 different weekends, and I channel it in those 2 weekends. And so I wrote half of it, channeled half of it last weekend, and then I'm going to finish it up in 2 weeks. So I have some time blocked off, and so I'm like actually right in the middle of this exploration. And whenever I'm going to bring something through, this has been true with the books, it's also very true for me with any courses I've created or just anything that's going to be a big part of my life. I go through school where my entire reality recalibrates to learning the lessons, and I get sent people who are teaching me a lot of things about this, and I'm experiencing in my own life, and I'm having clients come in. It's funny because I'll watch like the entire theme of my practice shift in alignment with whatever I know is coming. So this has been really on my mind, and something I have really been exploring and feeling that like kind of back and forth energy as well. And I really believe it depends on where you're at vibrationally. And if you think about like how we meet each other, and if you think about like most people are moving through the world with this mask on around them, like with this facade. It's like, they use the example in the first book of like, you're a diamond, but you're just covered in dirt. You're covered in mud, and so nobody can like see how brightly you're shining, and that's dulling your signal. So it's making it harder for what's true for you to even see you or come to you, and us ourselves. It's like we have these masks on. These are the illusions, the lies we're telling ourselves about what we want, because we often limit ourselves. We decide to settle. We decide to settle, right? We decide that only this is possible. We are looking for something superficial. We think we know what we want, and we don't, because we haven't actually felt the frequency. The thing is, most people in relationship, sorry if it triggers you, but I believe this. Most people, the general population, have not actually experienced real love. I look at people's friendships, I look at their relationships with their family, I look at their romantic relationships, and I'm like, is this commitment and obligation, or is this actually love? Like the divine definition of love. Is this lust? Is this I'm infatuated with you? Is this I'm committed to you? Like I'm like, if you actually look at what does it look like to show up with love, like divine love, unconditional love, most people do not relate to each other at that frequency. I'm talking from like a frequency perspective, and so if you've never experienced that, and I know for myself times where like I experienced divine love, it shifted everything for me. And I started comparing everything in my life to that frequency. Like I had never been met with that before. Right. And I thought, holy shit, the things that I thought were love before are not. Oh my God, it's toxic. This thing that I thought was the best thing ever before is actually toxic. And it's, well, we're in this relationship. You're my friend. You're my partner. You're my whatever family member. So you owe me this. No, I actually don't owe you anything. Right. That's not unconditional love and unconditional forgiveness. And so we think we want something. Do we even really know what we're desiring? Have we experienced that vibration before? And a lot of people honestly haven't. But the point is, when you are two people coming together and you both have all of your masks up, we don't even know ourselves, we're not even emitting who we really are, right? And we are still caught up in the lies of who we're still in jobs that we don't like and other relationships we don't like this is all just muddying the signal. It's all just adding more to this mask around us. And you come together, no one's seeing the truth of either person.
Right.
So how can you know if it's a vibrational match? And so it's the people that have done the work and the self-exploration to move through those masks, right? And really like discover who am I really, and share that, amplify that out where then it's like, okay, now I actually have an accurate perception. I can actually like show the world what my vibration is, who I am, and be seen in that way. And that's where I believe this thing about love at first sight, totally. But most people aren't meeting each other diamond to diamond. They're meeting each other mud to mud.
So you called out a lot of people right there. So
I know. I tend to do that.
I tend to do that. It's very intimidating of you.
I know.
Just kidding. But so if we take a step back, right? And because I think at some level we all want to believe that we are a diamond, even me on this path, like, and this is where I think there might be some, I don't want to call it toxicity, but possibly a shadow side of going down a spiritual rabbit hole, is always thinking that there's more mud to kind of take off the diamond. So is there a way that somebody knows that they've hit this alignment with true love, or that they are now that actual diamond that's shining, as opposed to still having some dirt on the surface?
I mean, I would say, we're always picking up stuff and there's always stuff to explore. It's just like being in the journey, like living life. That's the point. You learn different things. But to me, it's like, I think there's a moment we can look at ourselves and say, am I living my truth right now? My truth right now, which can change. Am I happy? Genuinely? Do I feel like I'm living love? Am I being love? Am I living my truth? Do I feel aligned? Like, these are very simple questions, but most people, if they're honest with themselves, might not say yes to all of those. And at that point, it's like, okay, well, then that's where I need to look. Like, if I'm not living my truth right now, then how can I expect to see the truth of any relationship in my life? And this is where, people will be like, I don't know, should I leave this? Should I leave this job? Should I leave this relationship? I don't know about these friends. And it's like, if you don't even know your own truth, how are you going to evaluate what's going on here? Because what can happen so often is we get in this place of like, should I get rid of this? You can shift dynamics. And that starts with you. So the only way I can actually evaluate, is this relationship going to work out or not, of whatever type of relationship it is I first have to show up the way I want to show up as my truest self in the relationship, and then just see how the energy shifts, see how that person recalibrates, because there have been many relationships that I was like, this isn't working out. And then I realized, I'm not being fully honest, or I'm not being fully myself with this person. I'm adjusting myself. And so before I decide whether I'm going to stay or whether I'm going to release this, I'm going to first show up as me and then see what happens. Because otherwise I can't see the truth of it, and so it really does all start with us. And, I think that there's always, different things to explore, but I don't know. I hear what you're saying, and I know people can get very onto this path of like, oh, like stop being addicted to growth and whatever. And it's like, I mean, if you're addicted to it, I mean, that's a you problem. Like, it's like, I think there's a balance between like, yeah, I like to expand and grow. And there are also seasons where I'm just like chilling and I like it, and I mean, such is life. It's the journey, right? I'm acquiring information. I'm learning about myself and other people. I'm adding to the collective consciousness. Like that's the point. So, I mean, I understand that people feel that way, but I feel like people who like kind of go on rants about that, of like being too addicted to the work. It's like, okay, if somebody's too addicted to the work, is it like the work itself that's the problem, or their relationship with it? Because that's still coming from a place of scarcity within themselves. It's not about the with the work itself.
Yeah, I mean, the way you're even wording that, it resonates with me as kind of being a fear of unworthiness. You're thinking that you're not worthy just as you are. And so it almost would maybe catalyze or propel that need to keep looking for another layer, another level. There has to be more. And I think what was partially in your answer is, again, something that I covered earlier, is just becoming present, because everything is at the end of the day perfect right now, as it is everywhere, because it's happening exactly as it's supposed to, in a sense.
Totally. And, I see it from both sides. Like, I've worked with thousands of people. Okay. And there are some times when, clients are coming in and like really what is most supportive for them is to have a little phase of like just going inward and yeah, like exploring themselves and like looking at their shadow and getting to know themselves and like realigning themselves. And there are other people who come in who I'm like, you're hiding. If you're waiting to be fully healed, like, I mean, what is that? What does that even mean? right? Like, I'm like, you're just using this to hide. Like, you don't need to be a hermit anymore. You don't need to keep like journaling 5 hours a day. Like, you don't need to do that, right? And so people, it's their relationship with it, and I find that there's something in there about the person who avoids that growth work, like that's saying something about them, and then also the person that avoids getting out of it because they use it as an excuse. Well, I'm not ready. I'm not ready today. I'm not ready to start my business. I'm not ready to pitch myself here. It's like, are you really not ready though? I mean, sometimes, yeah, we might really need to do some more exploration. That might feel, really resonant for us. And other times we just use that to hide.
And it comes back to what you were saying, even with your podcast, where it was something that you feared, which was public speaking. I think maybe I interpreted it wrong, but maybe you had like a speech impediment, or uh,
I didn't have a
did
speech
I
impediment, but I've always struggled with my speech.
maybe trip over
I
your
could go on a rant
words?
about that. Yeah. Yeah.
You're good now. You could talk all day about it.
Totally.
um, but to get back to it, it's like you identified something that maybe you would have been afraid to do. You said to yourself, I'd be afraid to talk long form on a podcast and have it out there for the world to judge. I mean, that's essentially what we're doing, right? Every moment is a potentiality for someone else to judge us. And so even having something recorded and put it out there, it's like, all right, here, I'm going to face my fear and kind of go and do the one thing that I'd be afraid to do. And thus you were able to overcome that fear of your speech. And quite frankly, you're speaking excellent right now. So, pat yourself on the back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I have found for myself, one of the ways I move through the world personally is I think because I felt debilitated by my fear for so long and it really held me back for a long time. And I made a commitment to myself that I wasn't going to do that anymore. There came a shift where I decided anytime I become very conscious of I'm afraid of this thing. So when I'm feeling resistance, I'm looking at, am I resisting this because I'm actually afraid of something here? Or am I resisting it because it's just truly not in alignment? And I can tell by my level of, ugh, like if I'm really resisting it, if I'm like triggered by it, oh, there's something there for me, right? But if it's more of like, yeah, just not really feeling like drawn there, and it's more relaxed, it's more neutral, then that's usually just an alignment thing. And so for me, whenever I am like finally conscious of what I'm afraid of, which sometimes can be a process. Sometimes we are afraid of things and it's like under there and it can take some time for me to realize, oh, I'm like scared of that. The second I know that, like I know that it's in my conscious awareness, my approach is just to get in there and do it. So the second I realize, oh, I'm avoiding this conversation, I call up that person. I'm like, hey, can we chat? Like, I just gotta move through it because I am not going to let that fear like control me. And I find that every time I do that, I I move through it and I'm like, that was just an illusion. I was building up a story that was going to be hard or that was going to be scary. And like, I can do hard things. And does it have to be bad? So for me, that's where a lot of my growth comes. And I'm very much that person of, and I say this all the time. It's like, as soon as I know I'm afraid of something, I jump right in and I got to dissolve that. I don't want to be, uh, blocked by it.
Well, and this comes back to the whole energy thing at the beginning of this, where we're talking about the energetics of a business, of a person, of whenever it gets blocked, and it really seems to me that you've kind of started viewing the world in this modality of energy and of like keeping it moving in a sense, like not allowing
Hmm.
it to block, making sure that it is flowing through you. And maybe this is a point to go to a high energy healing, because I mean, what how does that get into the mix of all this stuff, because it's not something I've ever heard of.
Yeah, of course you haven't because it's I downloaded it, so it's like a me thing. And it doesn't. The names don't really matter, I will say, but I do see the whole world from an energetic perspective, and I think anybody who talks to me kind of gets a sense of like, what is she talking about? Because I've always seen the world as energy fields, and I'm clairvoyant, and so when I'm seeing things, I'm just seeing like orbs and fields and things moving. Like that's how I understand the world. And what most people feel like is very woo, to me, it just feels like science of like, if I'm trying to direct water in a certain direction, I'm going to dig this hole, or like I'm going to make gravity work that way. And I'm going to like understand how gravity works, and then, do things to make the water go that direction. It's the same thing with energy. And the natural state of the universe is, it's movement. Energy moves. It's not like, nothing's supposed to stay stuck, right? These things that we think are solid, it's just all of these vibrating, moving particles. Nature changes and moves. So anything that is stuck energetically, like, that's resistance in itself. That's not the natural state of things. And I think there's a lot of value, at least for me, of just like, how do I get out of that stuckness? With the high, it's just a different form of energy healing. So I was traditionally trained in Reiki, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, like hands-on energy healing. You can also send virtually. And for me, that kind of just like stopped working after a while. And Reiki works on the third dimension. As you shift vibrationally, like, we all need to upgrade our tools, especially for working in the energetic realm. And so it was a vibration, basically, to channel a healing frequency, that I channeled in about 2 years ago. And it works, similarly to Reiki or other hands-on forms of healing, where I'm basically channeling the stream of energy, and it helps to realign the body, reactivate the dormant DNA. So it's just another form of energy work, but because the vibration is it's anchored in the seventh dimension. So we're working at the level of the soul. And so we're working at the level of the Akashic records, and it's a lot faster. It's a lot more potent. The experience, like the tangible experience, which I think is really kind of what matters. A lot of my clients, and on my side, sessions that used to take me like maybe an hour, I could do in 15 minutes. I could do the same amount of work in 15 minutes. My clients would tell me, they're like, it feels like this, like, it's just like a more intense, like more intense, sharper, like, got a lot done faster kind of energy. Um, so it's just a different frequency, kind of like, if I play different tones. Some of them, the really high notes are going to sound a certain way, and then the lower notes are going to sound and feel another way. So it's just different textures. And so a high is that stream of energy that I channel. I channel other energy healers, I train other energy healers. Sorry, I train other energy healers to work with that frequency as well. And so that's just my modality that I prefer.
It's pretty cool. So, then so you're kind of saying that you would like examine someone's soul, right? So, and I'm kind of loose with Reiki. I kind of get the idea, but I'm not like a
Mm-hmm.
novice in, or I am a novice in it. So, like with
Mm-hmm.
Reiki, it would be more just like body work because it's a third dimensional frequency, let's say, um, to see where in the body energy is being stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, what a high would be is you're more at a soul level and trying to get energy moving from whatever the soul or spirit is that would inhabit my body.
Yeah, yeah. And so, there's a lot of work we can do just in the Akashic records themselves, right? So, working in the Akashic records, you can look at, it's all the timelines, all the possibilities of your soul. And there's a lot of healing you can do instantaneously in the records, where you can clear energies from across many different lifetimes, incarnations. And so it's kind of like bringing that level of adjustment, whereas Reiki is very much working more on like this incarnation, this body, and just the vibration. Like, it's a bit thicker, it's a bit denser. It's meeting us at the third dimension. And something that's working in the seventh dimension, it is like, it's like hearing a dog whistle. Like, some people literally can't hear it. So it's almost like a lighter, it's less dense form of energy, if that makes sense. Like, I've had clients describe it as like, Reiki feels like a thick blanket, and a high feels like glitter floating on me. So just like
Interesting.
different density. And then on the healing level, like, we're working again more on the soul level. And so for me, I just find with intuitive information, I like to tap in there, and it's all valuable, right? So it's like a turning the radio dial. And so you can turn the radio dial to turn into different types of intuitive information. So when people are working with their spirit guides, for example, or like when I was learning to work with different types of energies, the radio station I'm tuning into to talk to my grandmother who passed, right, is a different frequency than if I'm talking to angels, than if I'm talking to an ascended master, right? These are different frequencies. And it's all there, right? And so when I have a client who comes in, my experience, for example, and I do this virtually as well, but I see a body like a scan. So it's like an energetic scan. Is just how I intuit. And so I can see where the energy is stuck and I'm like moving it out and basically channeling the frequency. I'm just acting as a channel and like using that to move it through, almost like my hands are like a power hose, but instead of water, it's energy, right? And so it can kind of dissolve that stuck energy, move it out. So that's just my experience, and I can see where the cords are, and I'm moving it out like that. It's very much like psychic surgery, is how I describe it, to people, just so they can kind of like get a sense of my experience. That's just how I personally intuit and use that frequency to kind of move the energy out. I'm just acting as like the medium in between. And then when I am at the same time, like I'll call forward anybody that wants to step forward, any guides for that person. And different people, different types of energies will come forward for different people. So for some people, I'm having more like past loved ones step forward, and that's a different vibration than if there are more angels around, if there are more like what I call like traditional spirit guides around, or different ascended masters, or like we can have elementals, or like sometimes they just show up as orbs. So it just like depends on the person, what they're more I don't know, just kind of like the vibration they're more connected to, and who's supporting them. There's no like better than, worse than. It's just different frequencies, different types of information as well. But if I am, so I'll call that forward and I can talk to those different energies. But then if I am doing some like, healing work, or I'm trying to get intuitive information or make a shift, then I'm probably just going to go right to their soul records. I'm going to go right to their soul records because I can basically, see their like all of the places it's affecting. Because sometimes we have things that we're dealing with right now that aren't actually relevant to this incarnation, and that can be cleared pretty quickly for many people.
So there's a lot there's a lot in there that I think I'm a little bit of a novice at, with the idea of spirit guides, elementals, all that stuff. I'm starting to read a book called Ask Your Guides, so
Mm-hmm.
starting to get in there. But one thing that I'm curious about with regards to the Akashic records, so we can come back to the spirit guides if it comes up. But with
Mm-hmm.
regards to the Akashic records, do you need to get somebody's permission to access their, like, the history of their
Yes.
soul? That's like
Yes.
okay.
100%.
Because that was something I
Yeah.
was always curious about, because it's this infinite library that has all knowledge, but there's got to be some sort of barrier, right? I can't just go, oh, I'm interested in what
Oh.
Christina's book of soul says. Like, I need your physical permission to allow me in there.
Yeah, 100%. So it's like, um, there's an ethics piece to that as well. Like outside of the records, I had one spiritual mentor like earlier on who he was like, just go to the park and just practice reading people psychically. I'm like, absolutely. Are you kidding? And a lot of teachers say that. And I
Really
was like, I'm absolutely not doing that. I was like, if I'm at the park, I don't want someone like reading me, where I just think that's very unethical. And a lot of people do that. And I just feel very uncomfortable about that, like ethically, because there is just like psychically, I could read a random person on the street if I wanted. Like, I mean, I'm not going to access everything because they're not energetically available for that. Right. But I mean, I've walked by this down the street and I'm like, oh, that person's cheating on their partner. Like sometimes things just pop in, but like, I'm not going to consciously like try to do that. I also like really don't need to know everybody's stuff. I don't really care. but with the records specifically, because yeah, there's a lot of information in there. You need somebody else's permission to read them. Like I would have to give you express permission for yourself. You of course have access to your own records. So you of course have access to yours, but if I wanted to read yours, I would need express permission. And even like if somebody actually knows what they're doing, it's like if I tried to just open yours without your permission, it wouldn't let me. Like it just would I wouldn't get access,
right.
So that's kind of how it works. Like it would just be like the door is blocked. I can't get in.
Interesting. Yeah, because there's this level of, the universe is only going to show you what you need to see at the time you need to see it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like this idea of well, here's what it reminds me of. Is there was one time I had a lucid dream, and this is weird that this is reminding me of it, but I had a lucid dream, and I meditated, because I've always heard that it's crazy to meditate in lucid dreams. And what did I do? Oh, I asked, like, show me what God looks like. And what came in was essentially the static that you would see on a television screen. And then the sound just started amplifying. Like, it was just like this shh, getting louder and louder to the point where I like woke up. I was like, holy shit, like, it got loud. And what I think happened is there's two things crazy. One, I like looked up later and they were saying, I read actually somewhere that black and white is actually the frequency of the universe, is like this black and white static, which, Celestine Prophecy mentioned that. And I was like, holy shit, like that like threw me for a loop. I was like, that's crazy. But the next level of it is that, we are these three-dimensional beings. And if you're asking for the totality of everything, right? Because essentially God is in everything, every inanimate object, everything. It's like, how could I possibly conceive that as a human being?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like this safeguard.
Yeah, there's a safeguard for sure. Like that's part of what we signed up for. And there's also, I think a lot of people, they're so desperate to understand it all that it's like they're trying to fit something that is so beyond the 3D into a 3D understanding that just it's like it's not going to work. Like there comes a certain point of trying to understand things where your brain will explode. Like it can't fit into any paradigm we understand, And I'm certainly okay with that. I think something that is interesting to me is, I have found with spiritual gifts and intuitive information and abilities, um, I think, there's a level of skill that can be developed. But to me, my path has been more about like humility and honoring the experience. And I have this conversation with a lot of people where they're just like, well, you're psychic, shouldn't you know that? I'm like, just because I'm psychic doesn't mean I know everything. Like I get the information that comes through that like is available. And sometimes there are things that we ask, whether that's me asking for myself or a client coming to ask, where it's like nothing coming through because you don't need to know. Like that's part of the point. Like what would be the point if I knew everything that was going to happen? And that's not even how it works. I have so many choices, right? I have so many
Right.
choices to make. I have so many different timelines it could take. But it would just defeat the purpose, of like the whole process. And to do the human thing is why I'm here. Like that was why I signed up to do the human thing. So there is that level of like there's some stuff, and I was talking to a client about this yesterday. I'm like, the same way that people rely way too much on external validation from, I don't know, like their favorite content creator or podcast host or the science, whatever the hell that
Air
means, right?
quotes.
People look for external validation from all of these other 3D people or things. Or, well, I read it in a book, I read it on the internet. And it's like, oh, come on, like trust yourself, right? But people do that with spirituality, where it's like, every single decision they're making, they're asking their pendulum, right? Or every single decision, well, my spirit guide said this. Well, I read, it's like, oh my God, you're just using spiritual shit as another version of needing external validation,
It's
really,
a cop
where
out.
it's like, yeah, it's like, it's the same thing, And so we have to be able to like move through life and just like actually trust ourselves and be okay with not like not knowing everything or how it's gonna turn out. And sometimes often the most valuable lessons we learn are in things that we don't think are working out. Like we wouldn't have necessarily chosen the way it played out, but big picture, that was exactly what we needed. And I was doing an energy update this morning, like do little like just daily energy readings on YouTube. And it was funny because I didn't think about it this way, but basically what they were saying was like, it was for anybody who's feeling lost, or like if you're feeling like you're in a fog, like where do I go? And people get really uncomfortable, like in this space of I don't know where I'm headed, or everything was clear and now I don't know which direction I'm going in, and I feel really lost. Which direction am I headed? And what the guides were saying was, those moments where you feel really clear in where you're headed, it's just an illusion.
Right.
It's just an illusion because something could drop in tomorrow and completely shift everything. So even those moments where like I feel grounded, like I feel like I have a clear path ahead of me and I know where I'm headed, it's like that's actually not true. That's just the illusion that you're in. So the moments where you're in that fog and you feel like I have no idea where I'm headed, left, right, forward, back, I mean, it's really just the same thing. It's just a shift in perception. And that to me was like, oh shit, that's true though. Right? That's true. Like that really shook me. And I feel like that's relevant here.
Yeah. It's very relevant. I mean, because there's this level of abstraction where, you want to, it becomes the responsibility aspect, and it's just a different
Mhm.
way to diverge responsibility off of yourself.
Hmm.
And do you think this is something I've been thinking about recently, where, or maybe someone proposed it, I don't know, but since so many people are becoming aware of spirituality, it feels like it's coming a lot more. I guess it's not probably not mainstream yet, but it feels like there's a lot more understanding around it and a lot more acceptance, a lot more around the idea of like I can manifest, everything's abundant, I'm in charge of my reality. Do you feel like there's a level of creating more uncertainty in the future because so many more people are aware of their ability to shift everything instantaneously?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, if I'm interpreting it correctly, I think no, I think we're just becoming aware. Like I don't think it's making anything less uh or like more uncertain. I think it's just we're aware of things we weren't aware of before.
Maybe more uncertain isn't the right way to phrase it. Maybe it's more along the lines of, let me see here. So it's like if there's a giant course for human history or
Hmm.
for the future of humanity, right? Maybe I'm looking at it too big of a scale if I say that. It's like,
So is the question, because more people are understanding manifestation and shifting reality, that we are that we have more opportunity because of that to shift the trajectory of the planet and where we're headed?
or is it maybe a better way to phrase it is, or is it shifting more rapidly?
I believe so. And I also believe that was like how it was meant to be. It's not a coincidence at all. It's like, oh my God, everything's on top of each other, right? So it's like, I mean, this time period, like, has been predicted forever, forever. But nobody knew exactly how it was going to manifest, right? And it manifested as this like lockdown situation, and there's just so many layers of everything on top of each other, and that was the dark night of the soul for many people. It actually, what the agenda was actually pushed people in the direction the agenda didn't want. Of it actually woke a lot of people up. It took a lot of people into that dark night of the soul and woke a lot of people up, and in doing so, like, yes, has like it's like created this fast track, I would say, but that was also like what we were already aligned with. We just didn't realize how it was going to come forward. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And that is something that I have thought about so much with regards to the pandemic, because to me it created a lot of uncertainty at the beginning because I was very much on the side of like, all right, this is going to blow over, like it's not affecting my age group, like I'm good, whatever, not going to worry about it. And then the fear did kind of creep in where it's like, after 2 weeks, the anger arose because I never really trusted government. I lean towards, it's always hard to put a label on it, but libertarian would be the closest I go for. And, I always saw it as the government overextending. There's this whole back and forth in my mind, and then I think at some point the shift occurred in my mind where I was like, kind of realizing what was going on. And to your point, I started seeing the beauty in it whenever the CDC and all the powers that be shifting the narrative back and forth. Okay, you have to wear masks. Okay, you don't have to wear masks. Okay, you have to wear masks. Oh, okay. And now they're doing it with the vaccine. It's like, oh, it's a good thing you got the vaccine. It's a good thing you didn't get the vaccine. It's a good thing you did. That shift, like it initially scared me, but now I'm like, I want it to occur more often because I feel like
Hmm.
that helps enable people to see how much of their own future they truly get to control. Because it's
Hmm.
like there's so much information out there that supports both, get the vaccine and don't get it. Like you can very easily find information that supports both realities of you're healthier if you did get the vaccine or you're healthier if you didn't. So to me, it really comes down to the pure fact of like, what do you want to choose? Do you want to choose that it made you
Hmm.
healthier, or do you want to choose that it didn't?
Yeah, totally. And well, I feel like on a larger scale, why it's so triggering for people is like, think about what that represents. Like, really, the government represents our relationship with masculine energy, with being supported, with being protected, with being stabilized. And people don't want to face the truth that the thing that really is representative of stabilization and structure, and I'm going to stay safe, has been full of shit. People don't want to face that truth. So people were just pushing it into denial, right? More and more and more. And then you see this back and forth. And that has woken so many people up to, well, what's really going on here? But then it's like, oh, I'm afraid to face that because now I have to take responsibility for myself. Right. But like what's coming up with, people are like, why is the government so inconsistent? You're just seeing the curtain pulled back now, right? It's been going on forever. And so that was a false sense of security, of stability, of I've got your back, right? And now it's being pushed in your face. And what are you going to do with that? Are you still going to turn a blind eye because you don't want to take responsibility for yourself? Right? Or are you going to look at that truth? And that goes right back to what we were talking about before around people are afraid to see the truth because when you see it, now I have no excuse to not take responsibility for it. It's like, so we avoid looking at those truths because then we have to actually make a change. And it's just the same thing highlighted on a collective level.
100% there with you. And where this is taking my mind is back to when you mentioned the patriarchy earlier. Now, so to give you some background on me, whenever I always get faced with the patriarchy, I've always heard it kind of given in this, let's say, leftist monotone of smash the patriarchy of, all of the people in control of the world are rich white men. And it never really quite sat right with me because I was always like, well, like you're taking the entire world and subjugating it down to a small few items that we're talking about here. Because if, this was my argument, was that if you looked at like healthcare or you looked at the schooling industry, those are very matriarchal societies, which are not societies, but structures that are, propagated by mostly women. So I'm kind of hearing something new now that you're bringing to light, which is the idea of it being the masculine energy, right? Like it's more of, well, the masculine side of things, which is the structure, which is, government is a more masculine item. So then that brings the question of, well, we're yelling smash the patriarchy, but the masculine energy isn't going to go anywhere. Like if we were to completely get rid of all masculine items in our physical world, that's just going to create chaos and not have any sort of structure to be. And so we have to replace it with something. So it's like you're basically just throwing something out that is obviously important and it's an underlying metaphysical construct of our universe without replacing it with anything.
Yeah. Well, you know what smash the patriarchy is? It is I'm just going to put something under the rug there and not deal with it. And I'm really not a political person. And what I mean by that is like, I don't give a shit about politics. It's not the way my brain thinks, but I think in terms of energy and the way I understand history, is more and the energy of the planet now. It's through masculine, feminine energy, and you look at really what's happened, where we have gotten out of balance the same way. If I had really bad digestive issues for a long time. Am I going to be like, fuck my digestive system, I'm getting rid of it? No, I'm going to bring it back into balance, right? Like, and so it's the same thing with these structures, where we have been in a really like wounded masculine energy overall. And that is outside of sex or gender or anything else, right? We all have both masculine and feminine energy. And so you look at both women and men, we have really been operating more from our wounded masculine, which is controlling, which is dominating, which is over aggressive, which is overly competitive, right? Which is ungrounded. And that is very different than healthy masculine energy that is genuinely stabilizing. Like, do you really, you as the collective, right? Do we really think that the masculine energy, like the structures right now, like on an energetic emotional level, do you feel that they're actually stabilizing? No, they're not. They're wounded masculine energy, right? Real masculine energy, which I feel is best felt like if you're around somebody who is operating from their divine masculine, you feel held. You feel safe. You feel that grounded presence, right? That sense of direction makes you feel grounded and genuinely stabilized, right? It is the container that allows the feminine to flow within it, right? And so, for example, if I'm having a conversation with you and I'm holding space for you, I'm embodying my divine masculine when you feel safe to lean into me, when you feel safe to open up to me, right? Because you just know intuitively I can lean in here, right? And so I feel like for us to kind of just connect with that concept is really important of what that feels like. And a lot of the systems and structures that have been set up have been in the wounded masculine energy, the way a lot of us relate to each other and show up in our world. Hustle culture, go go go, controlling, competitive, this or that, I'm better than you, there's not enough room to go around, scarcity mindset. That's all wounded masculine. And so it's not getting rid of masculine energy, it's bringing things back into balance and shifting from wounded masculine to divine, empowered, healthy, whatever you want to call it, masculine energy. And the same with the feminine, honestly, because a lot of our representations of feminine energy is wounded feminine. It's gullible, it's naive, it has poor boundaries. It's too floaty. That's not actually empowered feminine, right? The empowered feminine is powerful. It's intuitive, it's creative, it's the knowing where it's like you're like, I just know with my full body. Like it's a force. It's the seed of all creation. So we need both of those in balance. And it's gonna look like restructuring things to come from that, from those energies. And so it's really more of a transmutation, the way that I see it. And you can see how, our relationship with all things that represent masculine energy is affected. So this is why so many people have money problems. Like we have really, as a society, people have like really unhealthy relationship with money. They're afraid of money, they don't trust money, money is bad. What did money do to you? It's just a thing. It's just a thing. You're projecting your relationship to masculine energy, right? It's like, what's my relationship with supports? Well, on an intuitive level, we know that the structures that are meant to support us are fucked up, for lack of better language. Of course I'm not going to trust. Of course I'm going to have trust issues. I'm not going to trust other masculine energies, right? And this bleeds into our personal relationships, our relationship with money, and it leaves people feeling trapped. So yeah, I just see it as masculine feminine energy and really more of a shift into an empowered state than just getting rid of it. I mean, we're not really healing anything, or like if we do that, we're just avoiding it.
Well, and so I'm right there with you. I try to stay the fuck out of politics, but I love the energy aspects because I feel like that's the way to kind of look at these things. And I think there's probably also a similar thing here with the idea of defund the police. It seems like that
Mm.
comes from that same exact place. And I mean, that energy frequency that you're kind of emitting right now when you talk about it, that's speaking to me in volumes with regards to that as well. The thing that also came to mind is, do you think that there could be a relationship here, calling it the wounded masculine? I, growing up for me, for instance, it was never like overtly said, but on a covert level, there was kind of this idea of, you don't get to have feelings almost. Like, we're going to push your emotions aside. You're a man. You don't get to express your emotions. Do you feel like that kind of has a huge component of, this wounded masculine being propagated out on a mass level?
Yeah, I mean, so what that really is like the suppression of the feminine, right? Because the emotional space is feminine energy, and a
Right.
lot of, using that example, a lot of men are taught, don't feel your feelings, it's weak, right? And so what that is I'm not even gonna like fuck my feminine energy. I'm not even looking here. And so a lot of men get really out of balance because they're just totally shut down in that space. And that leads to, struggling. They can't listen to their intuition. They've basically turned it off because they've like suppressed their feminine energy. They're not very creative, right? They're really stuck in just their logical linear thinking. Often the biggest way this manifests is struggling with emotional intimacy. So a lot of people have like a lot of emotional intimacy struggles because of that, and because it's getting into your feminine energy. And so I think there's a lot to like suppressing the power of the feminine, because that is scary for people, because that's truth. That is truth, right? Like if everybody was tapped into if everybody was embodying their divine feminine, right? Because really, like, ideally we all have both in balance, then people are tapped into their intuition. And look at the large effort there has been from every angle to keep us tapped out, right? Everything that's put in the water, everything that's put in our food, everything that's pumped in the air, like they're going to do everything to turn off that third eye, right? Very, very
Right.
physically. And I think that's where this emphasis on, I always talk about this in terms of school. You grow up and well, where's your work? Well, where did you learn that? Or where'd that come from? You're not allowed to say, I just know. That's not allowed.
Right.
And so in that moment, it's no to intuition, no to intuition. And how that continues to expand is it turns into, I don't know how to trust myself. And now I'm an adult and I don't even know how to trust, people around me. I don't know who to listen to. I'm stressed out about everything in the world because this person's saying this and this person's saying this, and should I do this or that, or what's really going on here? And it's like, that's only a problem when you don't know how to trust yourself. Right? There's always going to be conflicting evidence in every direction, right? I think about this, for me, I think about like nutrition, right? I can find an article to show you, I can find a study to show you every food is bad and every food is
Oh
good,
yeah.
right? Like,
Oh yeah.
like you can find a study for anything. And so it's more about, that's not the problem. The problem is, what's your relationship to that? Does that make you feel unsettled? Because if it does, that's just highlighting where you haven't developed your own sense of discernment or your own trust in yourself, which is your intuition, right? And when as a society, the feminine energy has like been suppressed, and what I'm talking about here is like we're blocking your intuition. Well, now no one's going to question all this crazy shit we're doing, and that's how you control a population at large.
Exactly. Or even if you can make someone not trust themselves, then it gives them the power as well. Because like you're saying, I was super out of touch with my intuition. And, now I'm starting to probably the last 2 years, I like went overboard on my intuition. I was just like, all right, whatever my intuition says, I'm going with it. And now I'm starting to kind of try to find this like middle ground of, let's say the masculine, logical, setting 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 rules for myself and then allowing my intuition to guide me within that framework. Wow, I never worded it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. And and kind of exploring the world that way, because it was this huge pendulum swing. And I actually got confronted with it whenever I was in Egypt, because there was a statue I was looking for, which was an Anubis. Are you familiar with like Egyptian gods and everything?
Mm-hmm.
You've probably
Got
channeled
my
those before.
got my ankh.
Yeah, you're on. Nice. Well, so just something about Anubis was just like, dude, he's the man. I was just gravitated towards him, and I looked all throughout Cairo, all throughout Luxor for an Anubis sitting in like a king's position in red granite, because 99% of the time he's like standing. And so
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't find it, but I was like, told myself like, okay, if I find him sitting in red granite, I'm buying it. Case closed, right? And what ended up happening to me is, they could see how much I loved Anubis, loved him in red granite. And they find some statue that they pulled out of the back that was absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. It was like chiseled in. It had hieroglyphs engraved on the bottom, down the side, on his back. It had like this gold inlet, like kind of like around his eyes, and like in these like real beautiful sections. I think it had gemstones as his eyes. In the base plate, our tour guide was like translating it, and it was saying something about Anubis giving his energy to the king Ramses II, who for some reason Ramses II was also like grabbing my attention, and I was like, holy shit, like this is the trophy, or this is the statue, like I think I'm gonna have to buy it. And the guy goes, yeah, it'll be $40,000. I was like, dude, I was like, I'm not paying $40,000. And this little creeping in voice of my intuition said, buy it. Like, just buy it. You're just going to buy it. We'll figure it out down the road. We'll figure out how to pay for it later. Don't worry about it. Just buy it. And I'm sitting there like, intuition, like, I trust you, man. Like, I'm down. Like, you haven't led me astray yet. But the caveat also is that he wasn't sitting. Anubis wasn't sitting. It was red, but it wasn't red granite. And so that was the deciding factor for me, where I was like, okay, like, we're not doing this, like, no deal kind of deal. But it's that balance, and I guess it's a story to highlight that balance of listening to your intuition in that feminine, which I guess feminine intuition would be more feminine, and then setting those rules, which I was talking about earlier, as the masculine, and then operating within that framework to make something happen. And so I found that to be a beautiful lesson of where I was in that time.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like the balance of logic and intuition, and we can get into this. We love to do this thing as humans of this is better than this, and this is worse, and this is right, and this is wrong. And it's like, why can't you have all of it? Why can't I have my logic and my intuition? Because instead of trying to fight over like this way or that way, what if we get to have both? I mean, isn't that the point? So I think that is a really important uh, you know, place to land. And I, for myself, And it sounds like for you, like I find value whenever I'm trying to find like my personal place of balance. I like to do that by swinging all the way, like on both sides of the spectrum. Like that's just how I like to do it. And I will spend time like really far in one direction and then time really far in the other. And I feel like that just teaches me a lot. And then I can get right back in the middle and like find that good space, you know. But like if you're living really out of your logic and you're trying to find that balance between logic and intuition, I feel like sometimes kind of going really into the intuition direction can help you find what that real balance is, because if you're so in the logic direction, any little any little movement over the intuition direction, you're going to feel like, oh my god, I'm in balance, but you can still really be out of balance. So I don't know, I feel like, you know, the two for sure work together. Like we have all of that, and for me, my intuition shows me information that my logic you know, like it can't take me to that place all the time. But also there are certain things that I get intuitively and I'm like, all right, well, how is that going to happen? So then I'm going to use my logic to make it happen. So I think it's really living in the and rather than the or.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful because, you know, the first 25-ish plus years of my life was just pure logic, you know, masculine energy, computer engineering, the whole works, nerd, whatever. And then it was really in these last 3 years where I was like, holy shit, like spirituality, like, you know, empathy, love, being nice to people. It like really pulled me back into the intuitive feminine. And then whenever this statue occurred, that was kind of my pivot of, oh shit, like I need to use both of these. I can't be like
Hmm.
just on these like broad spectrums, like to the left or to the right. It's like the
Hmm.
answer usually lies somewhere in the middle.
Absolutely. And I think to be honest, like the way I view it is if I zoom out, like we think of it as like logic or intuition. And when I zoom out, they're they're both like the same thing. You know, like there's logic and then there's intuition is scientific. Like it's all based like if we go from quantum physics. And so I think that's something that's like interesting because I feel like a lot of people like spirituality. Oh, it's really woo. It's this thing like you believe in. I'm like, you know how I got my way to spirituality and where I bought into it because science. Hashtag science. Like it was quantum physics that made me understand it.
Same.
And that's why, you know, for me understanding energy, I just always felt like the world makes no fucking sense. And when I started understanding energy, I realized everything makes sense. Like, and the way I manifest money, the way I attract in people, to me it's just like it's moving energy. It's quite logical to me. It's like, all right, well, if I'm trying to attract in this vibration, then I need to make space for that. So what are we releasing here that's holding down this frequency? And then we're opening up the door here to let it flow in, right? Like if I'm trying to add more water to my bucket, do I need to pour some out? Like you know, what's going on here? To me, that's like the way I create things in my life is I look at it from the energetic perspective and it's like a math equation to me just with energy. So,
I'm on board with you. And that's kind of, there's actually a beautiful thing. Have you read the Celestine Prophecy? Celestine
I
Prophecy?
have not, but I have like a funny relationship with that book because so I don't read books that are kind of like in my realm.
Okay.
And I don't like listen to other channels or things like that. So I just like to stay in my zone.
Gotcha.
And with that book, I have one of my best friends. She's obsessed with that book and she's like basically there are like two things she tells everybody about when she meets them. The first is me, and the second is that book. And she tells everybody about me and my book, and she's like, "You have to read this book." And it's just funny because
Yeah.
now she's gotten everybody in our circle about this book, and everybody's talking about this book. And I'm like, I'm not reading it. Like, I don't want to read it. And so it's just funny because that book pops up everywhere. I'm going to tell her after
Yeah.
this, like, about it. But I have not read it, but I have heard a lot about it. I hear it's amazing.
There's a lot of insights in it, and one of them is actually touching on this, like the whole dynamics of science and religion and spirituality. Um, but before we get into that, I want to see if we can actually put your, and we'll see how this works out. So you don't have to accept this challenge if you don't want, but I want to see if we can put your channeling to the test real quick. So my dog, I'm not sure if you can see her on the stairs, but
Mm-hmm.
she's whimpering right now because she needs to go upstairs and the door's shut.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if it's possible, and maybe it's not even possible, if there's a way you can channel a communication with her and either to get her to calm down or come down the stairs. Like, first of all, is that possible? And second, if it is,
I mean, I can try. Animals are a little. I'll see. I mean, I've like sometimes they're very responsive. Animals are a little bit different than humans. Like in the way their brains work, it's so simple. It's kind of like it's like squirrel energy. So I mean, I can see what I'm getting.
okay. Her name's Copper.
Copper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me see if I can see her.
And you give me permission to chat with her?
Yeah, you have
Okay,
permission
Copper.
to talk to Copper. I've been trying to do it myself, but she's a little like antsy, but
There's something about the temperature. What's the temperature?
it's a little chilly down here, but
She's not liking the temperature.
really?
Yeah.
I mean, I got like a heater right here, but maybe yeah, maybe she has to go upstairs. But there's a little heater right beside me. Could you tell her that? Or I could set up like a little blanket underneath me to let her kind of snuggle. Would that satisfy her?
No, she's doesn't. The thing is that they don't like being around that like the technology.
Oh, it's just too foreign to her.
She's feeling like the vibration from the EMF. She's like trying to get out with space.
Okay.
She wants space.
Okay, well then I'm gonna go run and take care of
Yeah.
that. Feel free to say whatever you want to my guests and to the audience. And yeah, otherwise, I guess if you can't think of anything, I'll cut it. But feel free to chat to the audience.
Okay. I mean, I don't. I don't really have much to say. So we'll see if he cuts this. I feel bad that I couldn't convince her to come down, but see, that's the thing is I can communicate with her, but that doesn't mean I can force her to do anything.
It shows that free will still a thing, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like when people are like, can I get my like someone's? It's like I can't make anyone do anything. I can tell you what's going on. This happened to my friend. The dog will not eat, like will not eat, and it's been like a while. And so he was like, "What is like?" And she's just whimpering constantly. And so he had me come over, and he's like, "What is wrong with her? Like I'm giving all the food she likes. I've tried everything, and she won't stop making noise." And I was like. So I asked, and she was like, really wanted ice. And I was like, she's just saying she wants a bowl of ice. And I was, he was like, what? I was like, I don't know, just give her a bowl of ice. And so, and because I was like, eat the food, calm down. And she's not going to calm down. Like, I can't force the dog to calm down, but I can tell you what she wants, And so he got a bowl of ice, and she just went away at the ice. And he's like, what the hell? And after she ate this bowl of ice, she then finally ate her food, and then she finally laid down and like stopped crying for the first night in like weeks. And it's like, you can't force them to do anything. And that's the thing. It's like animals are like children in that way of like you can't tell a child like calm down or like make them do something. It's like you just got to meet them where they're at. And so in animals, it's like much simpler. It's much clearer. They're like very connected to source. Same with kids.
Right.
And so they're kind of uncontrollable in that way.
Right. No, that
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think we were talking about that on a recent podcast where it's like, if you see a flock of birds or a school of fish, it's like they're all moving in unison and there is no communication. It's not like, hey man, we're going to fly, 73 degrees southeast and go that matter for it's like, no, they're just in tune with whatever vibrational frequency it is that they're in tune with, and it directs their movement.
Oh yeah, they know. They pick up on everything. They pick up on everything energetically. Very telepathic. And the animals, I mean, this is a great way to just kind of tell what's going on. Like in the morning, I was going to walk first thing every morning, and like out in the forest, the trails are right by my house, and so
she's back. She came back.
She's back. Now does she come to your side?
Yeah, do you want to come underneath here? She's kind of looking at me skeptically. I don't know. We'll see. You have full permission if she starts getting mad at me for something, but
okay. But like sometimes the animals will act kind of weird. Like you'll notice like weird patterns, and it's like the animals always know what's up. like before anyone else. I get there's all kinds of weird stuff with the birds around here, and so it's just a good way to kind of tell what's going on with the collective energy or any sketchy stuff in the government. Like the animals can usually tell, and if anything's getting pumped into the air and things like that, the animals
Interesting.
will know.
Have you ever seen Rick and Morty?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so first of all, amazing show. I recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're into cartoons, I guess. But the grandfather is like this mad scientist, and the kid is kind of like he's not the brightest, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, and something that he asks his grandfather to make for him is this helmet to talk to animals. And so he's going around looking at all the animals, and they're talking about like it's like a hummingbird trying to get water, it's a bee trying to do this, and he comes to a squirrel, and they start talking about like how they're orchestrating all this stuff. Like they're like, oh, the assassination attempt in Rome went well, and they're going on like this long tirade, and he's sitting there like, holy shit, like what's going on? And then they notice him looking at him, and they're like, I think we got a Doolittle on our hands.
I love it. I love it. I
Yeah.
mean, it's funny because, well, it's like they know, right? Like they know, but they're not as like complex as us. Like animals aren't dealing with all their limiting beliefs and their conditioning and their biases. It's just like very simple. It's like food, water, this feels good, this is off. Like that, like that's it's all just vibration, It's kind of like I can give someone a look and give them so much more information than if I even say anything,
Oh yeah.
So but yeah, and they're just a little uncontrollable in that way, like even like a kid. So
So I'm curious about, and so this brings up an interesting point too, with going back to how you were saying there's like levels of permission when reading somebody.
mhm,
If I walk by someone and they make a certain face at me, I can tell if they're, maybe attracted to me, or if they are, happy to see me, or if they're angry, or if they're pissed off at the world and now they're projecting that at me. So that's like one level of abstraction of reading somebody. But then there's this extra level, like what you're talking about, where it's like actually kind of going into their psyche.
mhm.
So I'm curious in your mind where kind of that morality lies, right? Because I think we'd all agree that there's no verbal communication that I need to read your facial or body language to see what you're trying to say.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like when you're not trying, like you're not like trying to get information, and it just naturally comes through, like that's energetically available. I mean, here's the thing. We're all picking up energetic information all the time. Like you walk into a room and you're like, wow, I could cut the tension with a knife, right? Like you feel it. Or you can be sitting next to somebody, you can like, I could just tell you're uncomfortable, right? So we're always exchanging that like information. Just that's how it happens. But there are certain information that we on an like energetic level are keeping close to ourselves that somebody would have to like intentionally open up the door to get into, right? So it's sort of the difference between like anybody could walk by my house, but like there's a different type of person that's going to try and break through my front door.
Mm,
And it's the same thing with certain levels of information, right? So for me, for example, I've actually had intuitives like not be able to get in and read me at all because I do a lot of work around like fortifying my field because I don't want people reading me. But there's a lot of stuff you could just like pick up because I'm putting out energy, right? Like you would probably feel, how am I feeling today? Like, yeah, this is what she really thinks about it. So I just find there are different layers to it. And even with certain clients, like sometimes I have clients who are like, can you please like get to the root of this? Like what's showing up? And I'm like, they're literally like, I'm seeing you be like, you can't get in there. Like there's a piece of you that doesn't want me to see that. And I can't push my way past it, And so I think there's like, it's one thing to walk by someone and, or be around someone and just something's like coming in without you trying, or you just know that. There's another, there's like, it's another thing for me to sit here and like try and access something, like try and get in there about something you're not telling me. So it's just honoring like free will and what's available, That's
yeah.
how I see it.
That's interesting. And something you mentioned there. Well, I've got two questions here. Let's start with this. You talked about fortifying yourself so that other channelers, let's say, or other spiritual entities aren't able to come in to your field. And what that reminded
Mhm.
me of is in my very first psilocybin therapy, the girl that was sitting there, like as my shaman, let's say, she wasn't able to guide me, and which she realized it and was like, hold on, wait a second, like visualize yourself. She's like, are you wearing body armor? I was like, yeah. She's like, you got to take that off. I was like, all right. So I took it
Mhm.
off, and like it was this whole process of me not opening up to her. So
Mhm.
now the shadow side to that is that anyone has access to you. If you're free and open with anybody, kind of like the business scammers, they could take all your money and, pillage you and do whatever they want to your house. So, I guess there's a couple questions here. The first one is kind of along the lines of like, well, how much fortification do you do? Because somebody who could be meaning you goodwill might want to come in. And then the other question would be is like, how do you go about applying spiritual armor to yourself
Mhm.
if you're not a channel?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really simple things we can do, and I think it's important to remember, like, when you are working in the energetic space, it's all about intention. It's just intention and deciding, and so that's why it's so powerful just to make a lot of these concepts conscious, because as soon as you know, you can just set the intention, of what I'm available for and what I'm not. And this is the same thing as in our lives. I think I could talk about boundaries forever. And this is probably one of the reasons why people think I'm intimidating, like, because I'm Little Miss Boundaries, right? I'm like very particular about my boundaries. And that came from a long time of not having boundaries and being shattered because of that. And a lot of us, we're never taught to have healthy boundaries. And most people, when they try and put up a boundary, they put up a barrier. And it's like they think I'm either not talking to this person, or there's just a whole wall between us, or I'm all in, you get full access to me. And there's like a healthy space in between there, right? Where it's like, what am I allowing in my energy field? And what am I saying I'm not available for? And that is energetically, psychically, but that's just like in your life, And it's super important that we're clear with ourselves on like, what am I available for?
Mm.
Right? There are certain, like, sometimes people talk to me in a certain way, and I'm in my head, I'm like, yeah, I'm not available for this. This is a no. So we're either going to have to shift the style of communication, right? Or we're not going to have this conversation. That's about me. That's my boundary, right? I have a boundary. I will not have a conversation with somebody who is committed to misunderstanding me. If you've already decided you don't want to hear me out, I don't need you to have my opinion, then there's no point in me wasting my energy. And that for me is about me protecting my own energy in terms of like valuing it. And when I don't have those boundaries, I become exhausted. I become tired. I become cranky. I'm holding on to everybody else's bullshit. I'm
Hmm.
holding on to their projections. It's not my responsibility to manage other people's emotions or to process them, right? It's my responsibility to manage my own and move through my own feelings, and also for me to show up for the people that I want to show up for me to show up for my clients and my friends and my family, my relationships. And for me to do that, I need to be responsible with my energy field. And a lot of the anxiety and depression and confusion people feel is because they don't have energetic boundaries up, and everybody's tugging on them. It's like a leaky field. So it looks like it's like the aura has like holes in it, basically, is what it looks like. And everybody else's stuff is just filled up. It's like it'll look like a fishbowl, and it's just gross water in there. It's everybody else's crap that you're taking on and you're dealing with as if it's your own. And it makes
Mm.
you feel like you have got 1,000,000 pounds around you and you're carrying it all, and it's not your stuff, right? So I'm really specific about what am I allowing and what am I not. And when my friend is sitting there venting to me, I can relate to that differently, right? So when I already have an energetic boundary of I'm not taking on anybody else's energy, I can sit there and hold space and not take on that energy as my own, right? Because that's what most people do because they're not aware. And so they'll be
Mm.
talking to somebody and they're just letting that person energy vomit on them,
And
right?
absorbing it,
So
not just the
yeah,
vomit
and they're
on.
absorbing
Yeah.
it. Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And they're carrying that with them, and then they're unsure why they feel sad or they feel anxious or they feel heavy, they're not sleeping well, why they're carrying extra weight, why they're having health issues. That's everybody else's stuff. Everybody else's stuff,
So is that merely just
And
me being like, because, well, there's a whole line of question,
mhm.
but do I just basically say I'm no longer going to accept lower vibrational energy onto me? Is that kind of the?
I mean, there are a few things here, right? So I'll say like energetically, which I think is the easiest for people. Like I always have uh you can use different visuals. I'm a very visual person. So you can use different visuals because it's all about intention. So whatever suits you. So basically, I usually at the beginning of every day will tell people, put yourself in an energy bubble, like a bright blue energy bubble of protection and just set the intention that only energies of the highest love can enter, and anything else will just be deflected off or dissolved. And just throw something at it and just watch it deflect off, just so you know, yeah, we're good, we're chilling, right? If I'm in communication with somebody and I just need a little something extra, I will like visualize an energy shield going up between us. So like you could vomit your energy this direction, it's just going to get dissolved by that shield. It's like that clear mirror, like that clear window between us. If I was talking to somebody in jail, it's like that. It's like, yeah, I can't get through, but I can still talk to you, because that's just me. Like, I don't need to take it on.
Right.
And so I like to use the bubble. I like to use the shield, like visuals like that. I like to, a lot of my clients really like the fishbowl analogy. So I'll have them at the end of the day just unplug the bottom of the fishbowl and let it all drain out. Everybody else's stuff, just let it drain out.
Love that.
The shower is a great place to do like cleansing. And so just while you're in the shower, asking the water to clear off anybody else's energy that's not yours, right? So just really simple things like that honestly make the world of a difference. Like, people overlook this kind of stuff, but I can't tell you how many clients I've had who have such bad anxiety and they just implement those things and they're like, I am sleeping so well and I'm not anxious anymore. I'm like, yeah, because it's just intention, but what follows that's not going to be helpful if you're continuing to allow energy vampires in your life. If you're continuing to
Love that
make
word.
yourself responsible for everybody else's feelings and their actions, right? And so thinking about, what are the relationships like in my life and where am I feeling those tugs? Where do I still have all of these energetic attachments and cords? And so I can throw up a bubble, but if I'm letting other people like take energy from me, or if I'm like taking on everybody else's problems and trying to people please, it's like things like that. I mean, that's bullshit then, right? Because that is me basically giving permission. Hey, there's no field here, right? You can come in and access all of me. And so for me, it's just being really clear, like in my life from a very tangible perspective, what am I available for and what am I not? And for me, that's like, when am I on my phone? When am I on social media? Who do I communicate with? When do I communicate with them? People think I'm really psycho about like just my communication. And I'm like that intentionally because I run multiple businesses. I have a lot more messages coming in for me like all the time than the average person, And so how do you manage like thousands of messages a day? Like, I'm clear with my time management, and I also have a social life, and I need a lot of time for myself. I love having time for myself, right? How do I manage everything? It's like, I'm just really clear on my boundaries for myself so I can show up for everybody. And if I am talking to people all day long, I'm not gonna have time for myself, and then I'm gonna become cranky, and then no one wants to be around me, right? And I'm gonna be tired, all of that. So things like that, just in communication, and then also in how I relate to people. So I am very clear, like like just with myself, of I'm not responsible for other people's emotions. I'm not responsible for other people's actions. I'm not responsible for other people's happiness, right? Nobody's obligated or entitled to my energy. I'm responsible for myself, not them, and I definitely used to be a people pleaser and want to fix everything for everybody. And that was just draining my energy and making me more available for those energy vampires, or people who just want to take advantage of my energy, or splay their stuff on me, especially as somebody who is definitely empathic and I feel deeply and I'm clairsentient, I can like really relate, but that doesn't mean it's my responsibility to like deal with their emotions. In fact, that's really not serving them either. It's just abdicating responsibility. And so I'm just really clear on like the dynamics I will and won't engage in, and the way people talk to me. I know what I'm available for and what I'm not, the same way like if I don't have a child. If I had a child and I saw someone, treating them a certain way or talking to them a certain way, I'd be like, you know what, maybe they're not your friend. Maybe we're not going to hang out with them right now.
Right.
If people can't show up with a certain level of emotional maturity. So I'm just like really clear for myself in my life, very logistically and also emotionally, energetically, like what my boundaries are and what I'm available for.
That's really interesting. And I knew I wanted to bring this up at some point. I think this is going to be the spot. Our mutual friend Teal, who
Yeah.
if the audience remembers, she was on episode 25. She came on your show probably multiple times, I think, but the one time that stands out is I believe it was 514, your episode 514, where you guys did a channeling together. And you were, I believe, channeling Isis, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And she was asking Isis questions. first of all, the one thing that I found super fascinating was that I could tell a difference between when it was your voice and whenever you were doing the voice of Isis. And that to me was like this like switch of like, oh shit, there's probably something like this is probably real. You know, to me that was like your speech pattern changed, the tone
Yeah.
changed. I was like, oh shit, like I'm sure your mannerisms changed. But what I actually wanted to get to out of that is I think towards the end, Isis was kind of giving these circular answers almost, and it wasn't like very well directed. But then I think Teal picked up on it, and she was like, you know, these answers seem a little vague. And Isis responded with something along the lines of, well, you're asking me questions for the general populace as opposed to asking me questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of ripped me apart in a sense, because in my mind, I was like, holy shit, you know, it's like, you know, if I want to change the world, I need to change myself. I need to fix myself to be the best person I want to be. The shadow side of that came into my thought line afterwards, where it's like, well, you know, I want to help people. I want to help people get to this place of seeing the world through this lens, of doing the inner work, of healing. And there seems to be a little bit of a catch 22 that's occurring with me, at least right now, where, you know, I am getting messages from people asking for help, and I want to help and I'm trying my best to help. But the dilemma I'm running into is like, you know, I'm saying, hey, like, here's the course, here's the digital course, here's the program. But then it's like, you know, woe is me situation where now they're just constantly kind of, let's say, vomiting their negative energy towards
Mm-hmm.
me. And it's hitting me with this level of injuncture of, well, I'm taking on that negative energy. I don't want to expose myself to it, but I want to help.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like to you, I need to just set the intention at the beginning of the day to just not take on that energy. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean it's setting the intention and like, making a field basically and like I'm not available for this. But the action also follows that, in what we are and aren't available for. And I have definitely been through that. It's the reason why I'm so clear with my boundaries for myself, because when you're a coach, when you're a healer, when you're like somebody who's working with people, or like with the podcast, and you get a lot of messages and you hear people's stories. And, I'm also working like closely with a lot of clients, and I have to like I've definitely had to really learn how to manage my own energy, because to take on everybody else's stuff or to try and fix everybody else's problems, like I mean that was, I had mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but like the time I had to shut down my whole business and my whole life because of like my adrenals basically were burnt out, were because I didn't have boundaries there, and I was spending all day every day like answering messages and trying to hold space for people and like help them with their problems. And I was trying to help. And like in the process of doing that without boundaries, I couldn't help anybody because I had to shut down my whole life because I literally couldn't get out of bed. I had burnt myself out so hard. And so when I re-entered, I was like, I really have to be clear and like, we know what I'm available for. And it's not my job to like save everybody. And there's a certain level of, again, almost like, and I work with a lot of coaches on this, where like coaching isn't about fixing people's problems. Like you're reflecting, you're holding space. You're not trying, like what happens, a lot of coaches actually just create codependency. And then people, and a lot of therapists do this too. It's
Right.
not intentional, but it's like it just creates dependency, and that's not the point. It's about helping somebody like see that they have those answers within themselves. And a really simple example is most of my clients I work closely with will have like Voxer access to me, so they can message me whenever. And I'm just very clear, my hours are Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, and I will respond within 24 to 48 hours. And I, if somebody sends me a message, only let myself answer messages once a day. And if they respond immediately after, I don't reply. I wait 24 hours, because my boundary is, hey, I get to everybody and I will get to in 24 hours. And sometimes it's 48. I'm very clear with that. And that is a really important like thing on the client side, because guess what? Like somebody's not going to be available for you instantaneously all the time. And I can't tell you how often clients in the past have messaged me, I need you right now, like can you, like I'm going through this thing, like I have to be here in 2 hours, and what do you think about this? And I literally don't see it because it wasn't in my hour of when I'm answering messages. and they're freaking out like, I need your help, I need your help. And I get to it the next morning and I see that 5 hours later they sent another message. Oh, never mind, I figured it out. Yeah, of course you did. Right? Because people immediately jump to help me. And it's like, but if you just sat with it for like a day, I bet you actually wouldn't even tell you anything, right? Like you do have that skill set. And so I think it's like, what we think of as supporting people, is it really? Is it really to like just give everything to them, when really it's like, for me, I'm more interested in helping people cultivate their own intuition, their own discernment, like trusting themselves. And that's never going to be through me just like giving a direct answer. And like that's also with the guides. I think about my relationship with my guides and the beings I channel, and they've helped me so much. And it's not through just giving me answers, it's through asking me better questions, right? When I have a question, they shoot back another question, right?
Right.
And that is how they have helped me develop my own confidence. And there's also the level of just, that's my experience because of where I like what I where I channel from, essentially, where some people channel information that's much more like tangible, like dates and facts, and it like it could be more historical. That's not really like what I tune into. That's not really my like expertise area. Like I'm more in the like higher, it's like consciousness. It's like it feels more thematic, basically, right? I'm tuning more into like when it's Isis, I'm not tuning into any incarnation. I'm tuning into like the oversoul, like the overall vibrational energy. So it's not like this, it's not like channeling a dead person. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's a different vibration and type of information that feels like, if I was to compare it to something, it's like it feels more life coachy. And so that's always been my relationship with them and how they've supported me in my life, because I can ask something super logistic and they're like, yeah, we're not going to meet you there. Like this is the better question. Look at it from this angle, and from there you will find your own answer. And that has been really helpful for me in just building my own confidence. And so that's typically how they respond through me, just because that's
Interesting.
where they're coming from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a super interesting thing there where you're kind of touching on how you're asking questions to a different density kind of
Mm-hmm.
entity, let's say, because take the instance of good and bad. You could very easily ask the person walking down the street, is killing someone good or bad? And, first of all, the answer is, I don't know. Like the higher level density is maybe, but, on a surface level, it's like the answer should, quote unquote, always be no. Or is it bad? Yes. Quote unquote, yes. But even by taking your awareness up to a higher, let's say, frequency, higher density, you are then asking for the answer from a higher level of consciousness. And so it's helping you redefine the situation to that higher form. I understand what you're saying, but I'm like trying to like map it out in my head, and it's kind of difficult in a sense because it's, I am a
Well, it's beyond, it's a much more neutral perspective, and that makes a lot of people uncomfortable because they're not working in the realm of like, is this right or wrong or good or bad? Like if I'm like, is this a right or wrong decision? They're like, that's not a thing.
right.
There's not a right or wrong decision. Like what's the timeline? Or like there was the other day, uh I was channeling Metatron and he was just like,
Metatron.
I don't even know what happened. Yeah, he's like the keeper of the Akashic records. And he was like, I can't answer. Like, he's like, what timeline are you talking about? Like in this timeline, because it's like the keeper of all of the Akashic records. He's like, in this timeline that happened in this year, in this timeline this happened in this year. Like the same event happened all these different times. Like he's like, I can't go there. Like it all already happened, all of the possibilities.
Okay.
And so it's like it's not even meeting me there. So I'm like, okay, I guess that question doesn't work, uh
So
so,
so then would you need to go
yeah.
down to a lower vibrational frequency to ask that question? Would
Mm-hmm.
you prefer?
Yeah,
But then
something,
go
yeah,
ahead.
that's more like in this uh dimension, reality, time, space.
But so here's an interesting thing that happens where I've thought about writing a book on this, on the idea of truth, right? Because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, what is true gets extrapolated out based on our interpretation of reality, where, you could say that, this desk is hard, but in truth it's soft compared to like, maybe
Mm-hmm.
steel, or, you can say like separation, essentially, the idea of being a person, us being individuals is an illusion and therefore it's not true, because at the highest level we're all from the same energetic source. So where was I going with that? Oh, so when you're asking certain questions, would it be safe to say that certain questions can only be asked at a certain level of density of consciousness?
Yes. I mean, I don't know if I would say the word can, like anything can be asked.
Sure.
Will it be
Answer.
answered? So the way I view it and I explain to people, it's like the right, and I don't like to use that word right, but it's you'll see what I'm saying. It's like the right question is like the key that unlocks the door. So when you're asking a certain question, it's like trying to put a key in that's not the right fit. And so sometimes you get nothing. You're like, the door's not opening. It's not that the door won't open, but we need a different key. So we just need a different question. So it's about being precise with the question, you know?
More
And like,
frequency aligned question.
yeah, totally. And uh, yeah, with the truth thing, so I have, like, I channeled a book last month that should be coming out next year that's about truth. And it's from that higher perspective, right? And the guides, it's really interesting their relationship with language, because they definitely, it's not like they don't like it, but they're just like, this is super limited. And that's why a lot of what, we receive energetically from most people, it's just this vibrational transfer. It's like, you just know, and there aren't even words to describe it. It's like, I don't know if you've seen this meme, but there's a meme where it goes like getting the downloads and everything's rainbows and butterflies, and it's like trying to explain the download and then, like, the person is straining, their whole face is straining because it's so hard to describe. And so sometimes when I'm channeling, I mean, the guys will basically just be like, there aren't, like, they're like, these words aren't good enough, but this is all you have access to, so this is just what we're going to go with, because there's nothing else to, like, we got to go somewhere.
Right.
So they will acknowledge, like, this is like just really limited in what we can convey, which is why when I'm just channeling for myself, I'm not really using language or like words. Really, the language is just vibration. And when it comes to truth, he was like, what was coming through was, and this was just in, he starts with like, what is truth, as I'm going to define it through the book, because you can define it however you want, but I'm just talking about like, how am I defining it for the frame of reference. And it was basically just like, what is an exact vibrational match, and what's underneath that is like, the truth is a lot more subjective than we think, right? Because what's going to feel like truth for me, which is really what's resonant for me on a vibrational level, as like, this is a match, is going to be different than, me 5 years ago. I would be like, that's not fucking true, because that's where I was at vibrationally, and so it wasn't in alignment, and so that wasn't my truth. And that's like an example of how truth shifts, and what that really is the frequency has shifted. And it goes back to, there are a lot of things that I didn't think were true before that I believe are true now, and it's a vibrational resonance, basically.
Fascinating. It's reminding me of like making assumptions. Like if I do something, like, I mean, what's a good example? Maybe like flicking somebody off, but you're in a different culture. And so you don't know what
Mm-hmm.
flicking off means. And so you can
Mm-hmm.
make an assumption of what it means, and that's your truth, right? But to me, I'm telling you to fuck off. But to them, they're like, I could be saying hi, you know?
Yeah.
Eh,
It's all perception.
Right, right. And so it's that
Right?
vibrational frequency that you accept as being what is true.
Yeah, because like, when we think about like what's affecting frequency, or like what's coming from that, it's like, these are all of our biases, our perceptions, right? Like what we've learned, our conditioning, like all of that is playing
Right.
into it. So we're going to relate to it differently. It's the classic example of, I can go to a party with 5 of my friends, and we're going to leave and all have a different version of events, and all have it like, that was the best party ever, that was the worst party ever, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's true for all of us. And even from, a fact perspective, I mean, people interpret things differently. We have glitches in the matrix. We have Mandela effects, right? Like, we have like big events that people perceive completely differently or remember happened in like different years, right? Things like that, like that happen. And so that's the thing, is when you zoom out, and that's why a lot of the guides just, they don't even go there, because they're like, eh, if you're like, what date did I get married? I don't know, right? And it's like, well, in this timeline, it was this date, but then there was also this other parallel reality where it was this date and then this date. So it's like, which one's true?
Oh shit. That's reminding me of there's an idea I've been having because I've started kind of doing all this work. I've been starting to kind of get like visions. This girl,
Mhm.
her name's Sam. I don't know are you familiar with Simplifying Sam?
Mm-mm.
Okay, she's on TikTok and she was on a podcast episode earlier and she called them vision what did she call them? She called them vision memory or future memories. She called them future
Mhm.
memories. Have you gotten future memories? And first of all, I thought that was a hilarious way to describe it. But it's so true because, if everything is happening right now, then everything that happened in your past should be, or everything that's going to happen in your future should be as memorable as everything that's happened in your past
Mhm.
because it's all happening now. And so to that point, it's like even showing you how deconstructed your past is that you or how you could even basically shift out of a timeline in a sense where something didn't even occur in your past, but because you're remembering it a certain way, means that it occurred that way. And I've gotten to
Mhm.
places with deep meditation where you can go into your past and, it's kind of like the childhood trauma healing, I believe is what they call it, where you go in and kind of like consult yourself as a kid as you are an adult now. And you're like, hey, man, like, this isn't, I know you didn't have a father figure when you were a kid, but I'm going to be that figure to you to help you like understand what's going on here. And it's crazy because it absolutely changes your current reality and thus your future. And
Mhm.
it's like one of these things where you can actually time travel and go into your past memory and see these things and change events, but it's almost like just like a mental shift on a timeline in a sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think even just like in the way that we verbally describe it, it's all perception. It's like we can all use all these different language to describe the same thing. Whether that it's like, oh, I actually just like changed the timeline, like I rewrote it. I rewrote that part of the script, right? Did I reality hop? Like you can see it in all different angles, but like at its core, it is me right now. I'm being affected by like all other aspects and versions of me, right? And so, um clearing my past or shifting the future, like that's all affecting me in the now, right? And vice versa. So like how I show up right now or the work I do right now can clear things from the past, and also the future. And it goes back to, when I get an intuitive nudge, that could be perceived as my future self is coming to me like, hey, go this direction. I already know what's up. Right. That could also be perceived as just like the overarching soul that knows like literally every angle is guiding me to the highest, most aligned path, And so in that way, it's like, yeah, we're talking to our future selves all the time, but like what really is the future? We can get really quantum there.
Right.
And yeah, it's really interesting to think about. I think in the spirituality space, people can sometimes get like really caught up in a lot of these conversations, and I think it's valuable to explore. And then you get to a point where it's like, well, what's actually valuable for like how we're living and how we're feeling right now, and I really like to just bring it back to a more like grounded place, and think about, it's like the inner child work, like that is very tangible and practical, and like make helps people really feel differently in their life right now, and that's really powerful. And that's where I think like the beauty is in it. I think when we get into this place of like, well, what's happening with the future timelines or past timelines, and like, was this true or that, it's like, why do we even care at a certain level, so I think like that's sort of how I feel about some of that stuff as
Probably
well,
a
to
lot
be
of ego.
honest. Yeah. Yeah, because it goes back to like who's right, who's wrong, and it's like, I guess we're all both.
Well, yeah, everything at the same time. Um, what this is reminding me of, and I'm not sure if I saw it on your channel or somewhere, but it feels like something I would have heard from you. So tell me if it is or isn't. I don't know why. Um, but it was this idea of calling in the version of me that, or maybe this goes back to Sam, regardless, calling in the version of me that has already done something. So, like, for
Mhm.
instance, there's a book that I want to write, and I just finished, actually, I've almost finished the outline, but, and it's like calling in the energy of me in the future who has already written the perfect book, or at least the most aligned book that's going to work the best for me. And it's just like, hey, like, I want to tap into that energy, having that intention. I set that intention and I'm like, let's go write it, because I've been putting it off for a while. And it's just like, now I actually sat down and did that for like 2 hours. And just everything to the outline has just been flowing through me when I sit down to do it. And I'm like, shit, like, I should just be doing this from now on. And honestly enough, I did it at the beginning of this. I was like, I want to call in like different energy sources of good podcast hosts of, I think I even called to like your guys. I was like, if your guys want to come in, like, give me whatever energy is necessary to provide, like, to put me in a frequency that's going to have the best possible interview with, Christina. And, you set that intention. And,
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's like, it almost gets you ready for like, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to be the best. So for even instance, like even with my dog earlier in this podcast, I don't know if you noticed, but I kept like muting my mic. It was because she kept whimpering in the background. And so, I'm already like, well, I already asked to be in the best possible timeline. So, what is it telling me to do that, like, what is this telling me to do to make this interview even better? And so that's when I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, well, like, let's test Christina's powers, you know?
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. Well, it allows us to perceive opportunities that we wouldn't have otherwise noticed. And exactly what you're describing is like really how I do everything and how I tell people to manifest. It's like you're overcomplicating it. Like you already have access to all frequencies. You have access to all of it. So it's basically like, what am I just going to anchor into right now? And you can decide that, and so the version of me, I've always done this. This was for me like the shift with my business where I was like, okay, the version of me that is making this much money, like, let me just connect with her, embody her. And what is her day like? How does she feel? How is she approaching this? Where is she spending energy? What are her emotions? And I started to realize, like, wow, I'm living really off from that. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to like be her right now, be her right now. And so I anchored into that frequency, and my actions aligned with that. Like different actions came from anchoring into that vibration, right? I was showing up differently, and from that I was perceiving things differently. I was getting different opportunities because I was showing up differently, and like I was then adjusting my vibration, and then what I wanted came into my reality, and it's thinking about it from a different angle, like who do I get to embody so that what I desire is a natural byproduct of living as that version of me. That's like a very classic way to look at manifestation, and it really does work because we show up differently. It's like the difference between, if I take one extra second before I podcast or before I speak to just be like, I'm so pumped, I'm so excited, this is going to be the best interview ever, right? Like I show up completely differently than if I don't take that second to just set intention. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying, when you work in the realm of energy, it's so simple. Like it's effortless. It's just intention. It's just deciding. And so imagine how different your life would be if you were intentional about every single thing you did, and you set intention behind every single thing you did. When I'm paying for something, I'm saying thank you, and I'm sending this out into the universe, and I'm receiving this back tenfold. Imagine what you would attract in if you did that every single time you paid for something. I mean, it's certainly not going to hurt you. It's certainly not going to hurt you, but there are opportunities all day, every day to add intention to something, to add energy to something, in alignment with what you do desire. So you might as well take those opportunities.
I'm so on board with everything you're saying. And I think that was a huge, huge just pivot that I've had in the last week of calling in whatever energy puts me on my highest timeline for whatever I'm about to do, or for the next hour of the day,
Hmm.
whatever it is. Even if you just want to have a random hour where you're just like, oh, I want to fuck off for an hour, but let me fuck off in a way that puts me on my highest timeline.
Yeah.
And here, if anyone's skeptical, here's the best thing that I've figured out how to do this, where you can see this instantaneously occur. It's the idea of blessing food before you eat it. Now, I don't know if you've ever done this, but when you sit down with whatever your meal is, I like meat, I like vegetables, I'll eat it all. So I will sit there with whatever my food is. Let's say it's eggs and bacon. I'll literally mentally rehearse, the timeline of how the eggs and bacon would have got there, all from the chicken eating it to, or the chicken eating it, the chicken to laying the egg to making sure that, no, I don't think chickens eat eggs.
Yeah.
But all from, the chicken laying the egg to the farmer who took that egg, put it on a truck, to the pig that was slaughtered, and just rehearsing the whole process, applying love to the entire process, all the way up until that food like got on my plate to go into the grocery store and buying it. And I shit you not, this is anecdotal because it's just me. So this is why I encourage people to try it. It tastes better. It tastes like the greatest
Mm-hmm.
egg or the greatest bacon that I've ever had. It feels so much more energetically aligned with my body of consuming it. And I just find that to be
Mm-hmm.
maybe proof positive of what we're talking about. And I find it absolutely insane that it works.
I mean, there's so much science behind that, right? And you can anchor in from like all the different studies on water and how water stores memory, and you can charge water,
Right.
right, with your words, with your energy, with your intention. And so that's something that I do. Like every single thing I eat or put into my body, I charge it energetically. So you know, you might as well. And they've like basically shown how the molecular structure of the water will shift depending on what you've said to it. And if you put two glasses of water next to each other, the information from this water will transfer over into the other cup even if it's not touching, right?
Well,
They've also, and think about how that moves into food, right, where it's like food that has water, especially high water content food. What you're saying to it or around it, the energy you're putting into it, the energy that you have as you eat it, right, it's affecting you. And we're made up mostly of water, and so think about the words you're saying to yourself and how that's affecting all the water in your body. And when you're saying I'm not good enough or I'm ugly or I'm whatever, I mean, you're creating that on a cellular level, and you can choose something different. They've also done that with rice. I don't know if you've seen those rice
oh
studies
yeah.
where, you know, they have like the people are saying mean things to one bucket of rice, and then like loving words, abundance, all the good energy to the other bucket of rice, and the bucket with all of the negative words just turns moldy. It's like moldy black rice, and the other rice is great. It's long lasting. It's a nice and white rice, you know. And so they've shown this like in so many different ways. There's all kinds of science behind it. Again, it goes back to like these things that we think are spiritual or woo. It's like no, this is physics. Like it's you can prove it.
Yeah. And where did I go with that? Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because in the last interview, they actually said the same, they brought up the same exact thing. So we're getting a
Mm-hmm.
little double dose of it. And it's reminding me too, because going back to this whole intention thing, and I'll wrap it into this real quick. What I did is I make like I'll make 7 clips of my interviews and then kind of like roll them out. So it like kind of builds, so it's good for the algorithm, it's good for everything, it's good for promoting. But what I actually did most recently is I'll like try to find timestamps. And so when you have a 7 or 3 hour podcast, trying to find 1 minute timestamps of the best stuff is not easy unless you listen to the whole thing. So what I actually did is going back to this whole intention setting is I would sit there and say, okay, what is the best timestamp that I should go to in order to get, help the maximum people? And I kid you not, I did this for this last one. I kid you not, it was like numbers were coming to me and I was just like, go to those markers. And it was like the coolest parts of the interview that some of them I even forgot about because when you talk for this long, you forget some stuff. But I was just like, I was
Yeah.
absolutely blown away that I could actually sit there and say, okay, what's the next clip that I should set a timestamp on? Numbers would come to me. I'd be like, fuck, like, how did you guys know?
Yeah, well, because you're accessing, like, this is about accessing different information. I always tell people it's like if you're not using your intuition, it's like being in an entire library and only ever reading one book. Like, what are you doing? You know, and people who are just working off of, you know, just off of logic or like, oh, I'm going to go back and listen to the whole interview. You are working with like 5% of the information available to you when it's faster, more efficient to just tap in and get the answer, you know. And this goes back to how do we make these things really tangible. And like this is why I love spirituality and energy, because you know the reason why I got into this, it was about health, and then it was about business. It's about like making actual change. And I like to create a lot of things, like to do cool shit. I like to you know, I run multiple businesses. I like to be very productive. I'm a generator, and it's like, how do we actually utilize this information? Well, I can do a lot of things really quickly when I'm working with all of the information actually available to me, you know. And so that's a perfect example of like how much more productive you can be. Just tap in and get the answer, and then you can move on. And you could have just spent, you know, 3 hours doing it the hard way.
Yeah, you're tapping into infinite knowledge, right? Like, and this even goes back to our level of abstraction with densities, right? Because if I'm a third density being, an object, person, physical item, I am not even able to access infinite. Like how that, first of all, think about infinity. It's an insane concept that we boil down into one word, which is crazy in itself. But if there's infinite knowledge out there, why am I not using it? Why am I just limiting
hmm
myself to only what I've learned in this lifetime? It becomes, suffocating in a sense when you look at it from that perspective.
Oh, totally. And like what's cool is there can be trigger moments where no remembrance is unlocked or a knowing is unlocked immediately from other lifetimes, right? Because you've had different incarnations to learn different lessons, to collect different knowledge. And this is what's really cool. There can be moments where people like have the instantaneous turn on, and that person can in 1 second speak a different language because that's what they spoke in this other lifetime. Or like in 1 second they know how to play the guitar and they've never learned before, but
Mm,
they used to play guitar in a lifetime. And so we can have these trigger moments where we kind of, get past our own humanness for a second and access more of our soul memory. And it gets, turned on. And we have these skills that we're like, I never learned in this lifetime, but you did in another lifetime, or you think about, I mean, in the other direction, it's like people have a lot of phobias that people have are because of experiences in other lifetimes that haven't been cleared. And so it's not necessarily like relevant to this lifetime. And so it can just, be cleared here and then also cleared in, whatever the energy was from that life as well. So yeah, I think like for me, I'm like, if you're a high achiever, honestly, you you need to use all of your information
yeah.
and all of your tools.
That's so true. What, yeah, I guess, where was I going to go with it? Oh, so this kind of comes in the same thing. You were talking about asking the right question to access the right door, energetic alignment. I find myself recently kind of in moments where I'm not sure what to do next. Like, let's say everything's taken
hmm
care of. I've checked all my boxes with regards to the podcast for the week, but I feel like there's something more to do. And I don't want to say it in the sense of like, I need to be doing something, but it's like, otherwise I'm just going to sit here and be bored, which don't get me wrong, there's total utility in that. But it's this feeling of there should be something more. But then it comes to what you're saying, where I feel like I'm not asking the right question. Do you
hmm
have any insight for how to ask the right question?
Yeah, so I think it's sort of like developing a skill. The longer I've done this, the better I've gotten at usually like asking the quote unquote right
Frequency
question.
aligned question.
Yeah, more quickly. So, and it's funny because it happens with clients all the time. Like they're like, I'm stuck, and then I'm like, well, just ask it this way, and then we get in. So I think there's a piece of just like you practice and you get better, you get faster. But I always think about it like just trying different angles of the question. So if I was you and I was exploring that, it's like, okay, what should I be focusing on right now? Show me what I should be focusing on right now. What should be what is this time, this space meant to be used for? Please show me, right? Or however you intuit it, right? Um, how else can I expand the podcast? Where is my time best spent related to my podcast? Right? Which of these three items should I be focusing more of my time on? What is the best use of my time if my goal is to connect with these types of guests? Right? Like
Right.
I'm just going at it from different angles, and usually like there's going to be one that really clicks. Um
Well, and I would
and
love to
yeah, yeah.
highlight that you're also asking open-ended questions versus
Mhm.
myself when I would do it. It's like, and I see so much error in this now, but it's like, should I do this? Should I eat
Oh
that?
yeah.
Should I do that? Right. And two things wrong with that. Number one, I'm saying should. And number two,
Mhm.
yes, no is a terrible way to gain information from this vast, infinite source of knowledge. It's like, because first of all, you're asking should, and then second, it's a yes or no. So it's like you could get a mixed bag for
Mhm.
everything.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I never do should questions. I don't do yes or no questions. And I'm also really careful about like, what's the energy right now? Right? Like right now. For example, with food. I think this is tangible for people. It's like what food is most supportive for my body right now? What diet is most supportive for my body right now? Well, guess what? You could get a different answer tomorrow. And so it's like really being people will anchor into like one thing they get
Hmm.
and stay stuck with it, but the energy is always shifting. Or sometimes, and I want to bring this up because I feel it will help people. if you feel like you're not getting anything, right? It's like the door is just locked. I have the wrong key. It's often the question that you don't want to ask, right? So for example, what do I need to focus on more in my career? How can I get a raise? How can I enjoy this more? How can I re-spark my creativity? And they'll ask all of the questions except the one that is, what is the career that's most in alignment for me? Like, we'll avoid the question where the answer could be something that we don't even want to look at, right? And so this is another piece of like intuitive development, where whenever people feel stuck or lost, it's usually that there's something in their subconscious or just something that they've decided that can't be the answer. And that's usually not something in our conscious awareness, right? So if we've already decided that moving to another country isn't an answer, then we're not even going to be open to receiving that. So it's going to feel like nothing's coming through. If we've already decided I'm never getting a divorce, well, then that answer is never going to come through because we've already just been like, it's in the closet. I can't even see it, and we often do that without realizing it, where we're orienting ourselves like, okay, the answer's over here. It's in this whole area, right? But I'm not looking at what's behind me.
Right.
And there's information behind me too, and so it's like when you're actually opening up and you want to get the best information possible, what have you already decided can't be true?
It's like identifying
what
limiting
have you already
beliefs.
decided you don't want? Yeah, exactly. And so I know for me, anytime I felt blocked or it's like nothing's coming through, I don't know what to do, it's usually like, what's the thing I've already decided I'm not giving up, I'm not letting go of, I'm not changing. Like, because, and the reason why we do that is because we think it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. No, I'm good there. But what if that's the thing that has to go? And for me, I know in my life, it's often the thing where I think everything's good, that when I get to the bottom of it, I'm like, oh shit, that's the thing holding me back.
Right.
I didn't even consider it. What's the thing you're not even considering? That's usually the answer.
Man, you're on point, because what it's bringing me back to is that first psilocybin experience again.
Yeah.
I was in this point in my life where I was like, all right, I'm done fucking around with girls. I'm ready for a committed relationship, blah, blah, blah. And to make a long story short, everything was peaceful. Everything was solid first 2 months. She asked me, what are we? It sent me through like this whole confusion, this whole chaos. I had no idea, da, da, da. My intuition was not even a thing. I would have called you crazy if you said anything about spirituality and crystals. And, and I got introduced to the psilocybin teacher, and what got uncovered is there was sexual trauma in my past that had gone unacknowledged. I saw it and I was like, okay, like I know that happened, like whatever, but it's not like whatever. It's like you need to go in and understand how this ripple has cascaded throughout your entire life. And gosh, that was my first, and so far, well, I guess first dark night of the soul, because it was it was like, I still remember sitting there like looking at a white wall and thinking to myself, like, how do I actually know that's a white wall? Because it breaks you down onto realizing like something that it's so weird, because it's wrong now, but then looking back, you're like, holy shit, like it's been creating all of this around me that I could have just very easily changed by exactly what you're saying. And it's trying to identify those blind spots, which can be so difficult to do, because how do you know it's a blind spot if you've just been so programmed into seeing reality in that light?
Well, that's why we have people to reflect and mirror for us. I like we have friends, we have coaches, mentors, we have people to reflect. Like we help each other out, because that's the truth of it. When you're moving through the world, everything you're experiencing, you think is normal, right? Like you don't even know there's another way until someone bumps up against you and it's like, no, my reality is completely different. And you're like, oh shit, like I only know what I know, right? I don't know what I don't know. And so that's kind of the point. And I was just talking to one of my clients about this, because she was like struggling with this with her intuition, and she's like, it makes me feel like I second guess myself when you'll bring up something that I never even thought of, and I'm like wondering how come when I ask intuitively it doesn't come through. Does that mean I'm not like a good enough psychic? And I'm like, no, that's not it at all. Like everybody, like I have people who read for me. Like there are certain things I know in my life where I'm like, I'm way too close to I know I'm blind somewhere, so that's why I go directly to my mentor, right? Because I know she'll see the blind spot. And so like, having those people in our lives is really valuable. We're here to live in connection. Like, we're mirrors for each
For
other.
sure. Is there a way you could ask if you're not, so I'm trying to construct like this reality in my head, right? So if there's like something we're trying to figure out, we know there has to be a blockage of some sort. Is there a way you're able to just ask the 7D people, like, hey, like,
Mm-hmm.
where's the block? I know there's a block here, but what's going on?
Yeah, I'll just say, like, I'll ask that basically, like, what's the thing that I'm not seeing, right? What's the block to me seeing the answer or knowing the answer? What's the interference? Please show me the interference here. Right? So I can just ask that directly. But the thing is with your intuition, is we can only receive what we are energetically available for. And so sometimes people will ask that, but because they're not, again, like fully ready to see it, like, we'll block ourselves from it. The same way, there are certain memories from childhood you might have like kind of blacked out to protect yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and with intuition, like, you're only going to receive what you're available to receive. So that's why it takes trust in yourself and like it takes surrender. Really, it takes like real surrender to be able to ask to be shown the block and for it to come through, because most people, because it's a block for a reason, and so they're not actually energetically like available for it. Like, if you're committed on a deeper level to staying in the illusion, then when you ask that question, the truth isn't going to come through. It's just going to be blank.
Gotcha.
So like, how committed to the truth are you?
Right. And it's almost like they know you better than you know yourself in a sense.
Well, totally, right? Because like, there can still be fear there. There's still like ego there, and like, we're zooming, I'll say, out, up, however you want to see it, onto the soul level.
Gotcha.
There's no hiding.
Gotcha. And so then so then if I'm looking at this from the perspective of a 7D entity, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Clayton, we'll say it's not me. We'll say Johnny. Johnny has some sort of emotional block with money, and he's going and asking all these questions. Why am I not a millionaire? Why is this? Why is that? Blah blah blah. And the 7D figure can see that blockage, but Johnny isn't asking the right question. Is there a level of discernment from that 7D figure of he's not ready for the answer, or I can see that he's going to reject the answer? Like, how does
Mm-hmm.
that perception work?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there are things that I ask, and the guides or my higher self are just like, no, like, they're like, you got to go through it. Like, you'll figure it out later. Like, it'll come through later. So there are certain things that like we don't need to know right now, or like, we got to figure it out ourselves. Like, if the answers are just, I mean, so I'll tell you a story. Like, I'm in the middle of this book, and I know about like how, like, I can kind of feel like, okay, we're coming to a close, and that's when I finish up the first weekend of writing before moving to my second one. And at in like, when I was writing last weekend, there came a point where I knew I had a couple more hours. I'm like, oh great, I can get like another 10,000 words in. We'll be like ahead of schedule, so next weekend will be a lot more chill. And I was getting really excited about the information that was going to come through. And my guides, because it was related to my love life, I was like, this is going to help me with my love life. I was like, I just want the answer. And so I'm like all excited about what they're going to say. And they just stop. And I'm like, hello, like, we still got some more to do. And then getting to the juicy part. And they're like, no. They're like, no more information is coming through until you do XYZ. And I was like, what? I was like, no. And they're like, we're just giving you the answer. You think you just get the answer just by channeling? Like, you got to live this thing out, dude. Like, you got to do it. And so basically they were like, you're not getting the rest of the book until you do this damn thing. And I was like, so upset, right? But that's just like part of it. I was like, well, yeah, because that would be too easy.
Right.
Why would I even live my life, or like really like learn the lessons and like do the thing, if it was all just given to me? It's too easy. It's like, there's no point. then why would I even come do the human thing? I could just go stay in a higher dimensional being, and like I don't need to go through the experience.
Right.
It's the experience that's the point, and so that was a very like relevant recent example for me. It's like, okay, well, if I want to finish, like I don't get to just jump ahead.
Right.
Like I gotta live it. I gotta do it.
But so then the XYZ stuff, was that like physical, tangible things that they gave you to do in the physical realm?
Oh yeah, I had to tell somebody.
If it's
I had to
personal.
tell somebody.
Yeah.
Well, I did tell somebody basically like the type of soul connection we had, which was like basically expressing feelings that I was putting off. So I had to like be like, I need to talk to you.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's really fascinating. Now, you said you didn't listen to books, but do you watch movies? Have you
Yeah.
heard of the movie? And I just watched it this morning. Everywhere, I need to find it. Everywhere and Everything, All the Time, All at Once.
No,
Okay,
I haven't.
so I just recorded. It's going to release tomorrow on my like catch up series. But this movie,
Uh-huh.
let me look up the title real quick just so I nail it. Every
Is it like a documentary? Is it a movie?
It's a movie. It's called Everything Everywhere All at Once. And this
Okay.
movie shook me to my core. Well, the core concept is that it's like a multi-dimensional movie. And the core concept is that a fracture in the multiverse occurs, and it like sends this lady into like the spiral where she has to like save the universe essentially. And the core concept of it, well, not the core concept, but a piece of the puzzle is how like a small action can have just this like ripple effect throughout time. And they would do like these crazy weird off the wall shit, like give himself a paper cut or do this other thing so that they could then move into this other dimension. And what I find fascinating is, well, first of all, it blew my mind in so many different regards. I'll just leave it at that, and maybe we can have you back on when you watch the movie. But what is really fascinating to me about what you just laid out is that you could still find those actionable steps to get you to the information you're looking for. And so is
Yeah.
that
Totally.
kind of what the action, like it's almost like this like balance, if we're looking for a yin yang thing, it's like going to your intuition, going through this intuitive place and saying, hey, this is the information I'm looking for, and then them saying, well, you need to go back to your physical world and actually do these things, and then we'll give you that answer. Is that like a balance that you see in a lot of the questions you ask?
Oh, totally. So I think something that people don't understand about like the path as an intuitive or a healer is like I have to live out everything that I'm going to talk about, teach about, channel about. Like I first have to do that first. I don't get to skip ahead. And so my life is fucking insane because of that. Like my friends always, they're like every day in my life, they're like, your life is a reality show. Like every single day is so crazy. And it's like, it's what I signed up for. I have to go through it. And I think a great example of this, honestly, is with my health issues. And that was all, there was like larger spiritual, energetic reasons for that. And part of that was, I think about all of the information I collected on that path. And there was a point a couple years ago where I was like, what else have I why is this still serving me? It's there because it's serving me. And it's like, and I got really frustrated because I'm like, look, I can tune in for anybody else and just get the damn information, and they heal instantly. And I was getting really bitter because I'm like, I'm sick of dealing with this shit. Like I have access to all of this information. Why is it not coming through for me? And they're like, because it's still for you. And I think about the path I walked, right? And had those health issues gone away, I wouldn't have learned about all these different modalities, all these different tools. I've done every diet. I know so much about nutrition. I understand the energetics of food, and like I just have a different perspective on health than most people, and mental health. And I think about just a lot of things I learned and the things I came across. Without still having those issues, I never would have gone there. Right? Like I would have just like, I just tap in, okay, cool, done, on to the next. It's like that life experience made me who I am and taught me so many things I never would have otherwise encountered, And so it was so valuable for me to like be stuck in it. And I was stuck in it until I really learned all of the lessons related to it. And so I think, that's something that a lot of people like misunderstand. They're like, well, can't you just like tap in and get it? It's not like that. It's your life, especially channeling books. I was talking to one of my friends about this as well. It's like it's a huge initiation, and the people think like with channeling books, like, oh, it's so easy, you just sit there and channel it. First of all, the amount of time and work it has taken to have an aura big enough to bring something like that down, to be able to channel that amount of energy for that time straight, most people would literally fry out and die. Like channels have died because of the frequency. It's like being it's like an electric current running through you, okay? So like the amount of like the years of work that has taken to like get to that place to be able to bring that through, right? You're looking at all of that. So yeah, I can write like my last book I wrote in like 2.5 days. Okay. But like it's all of the years leading up to that. And it was all of the years of initiations in terms of the leaps I had to take, the scary shit I had to cannonball into. And that's why I am that way, because I learned real quick, like, I, I have to do the scary thing because that's the initiation that gets me to the next level. And that's when, yep, okay, great. Now this turns on for you. But like, I have to do the human thing. I have to move past the fear. I have to like live the experience to really integrate that information, because that's the difference between knowing in your head and knowing in your body. Like I've lived it, I've done it, I've experienced it. I mean, half the stuff I talk about, it would mean nothing if it wasn't applied in my own life. It would mean nothing if I hadn't walked the walk, right? And a lot of people like to just talk the talk, and it's like, but have you lived it? And you have a completely different perspective when you live it. And that's also how I know how to ask better questions, more precise questions, because I've had to move through it. And that's also that opportunity for deeper compassion and empathy and really seeing people deeply, because I get it. I know how scared shitless you are, and like when you're shaking in your boots and taking those big leaps. And if I just tuned into it and got the answer and I'm like, yeah, just leave your job. And I didn't know how scary it was to leave your job, right? It's a completely different experience. And so that for sure, like when it comes to channeling work and intuitive work, it's such an important piece to understand, because most people don't access all of their spiritual gifts because they're not willing to do what they got to do,
Mm.
which is doing the scary thing, which is releasing the things that make you uncomfortable. Like you got to live it out, and you do get rewarded for that.
Well, and to even take this to an energetic standpoint, right? And I could hear it in your voice. I'm not sure if anyone else picked it up, but when you were even kind of going through the way of saying, like, oh, just quit your job, like you didn't put the energy in it that is resonant with somebody who's going through quitting their job. So if you're going to tell somebody that they need to quit their job, you need to feel it. And what it does is it
Hmm.
brings that vibrational energetic frequency into you. So now whenever you tell that person, yeah, it sounds like you need to quit your job, they can actually feel that and resonate it with as the truth, as opposed to you being maybe like a quasi interpreter for the universe.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. It's like, okay, if I'm reading for somebody and it's very freaking obvious, like they got to get out of that marriage, like they got to get out of that job, whatever it is, I'm going to look at them and be like, how are you feeling in your career right now? Is there something draining your energy related to? I'm not just going to be like, you need to do that. That's not my job. My job is actually like, if I'm feeling that vibrationally, I'm going to ask a better question to unlock that knowing within themselves,
Mm,
because it's a completely different experience for me to say, you should get out of your job, than for me to guide you to you saying, I need to get out of this. Right? Like it's a completely different experience, because that's the moment when you know, when you actually know, when you internalize, when you say it yourself. And if it's truth, I don't have to tell somebody that. I just have to ask questions that open up the space for them to admit it to themselves.
gotcha. And it's so interesting you word it that way, because there's so many parallels there with the way that you interact with your own guides to figure out your information and then relay it to your clients to get them to figure out the information.
Yeah, well, because it's like, uh I learn from them, right? And I'm really glad that like it goes back to the I don't want to create codependency or dependency, and there have been times where like especially when things really blasted open for me psychically, shortly after that, like it was like everything just went dark. Like I wasn't getting anything psychically for a period of time. And there was like really important lessons in that. where it's like I have to be able to navigate the world without that and like still feel just as confident,
Mm.
and that's self-sufficiency, right? That's sovereignty. That is real sovereignty, and that is confidence. And so like for me, it's the same thing with a client, and I kind of scan for this with people I work with. I had somebody the other day. I'm like, I just don't think this is a good fit because I could tell in the way she was talking. She just wanted someone to tell her what to do.
Mm.
And I'm like, please do not like outsource your decision making to anybody. um, I'm like really confident in my gifts, like really confident about how accurate I am. And I also don't ever want somebody to outsource the decision making to me. And I also don't want somebody to like, I've had clients who know how accurate I am, and so then they just always ask me. And it's like, but what if I'm not here? You don't need me. Like if I can access this, you can too. It's your own soul, right? Like you can do it, and so I'm just really like aware of where people abdicate responsibility and depend on other people, and I don't think that serves anybody.
So do you think then and I'm trying to tie this in, like if we're talking about all these, let's call them the clair psychic powers, which is like clairaudience,
Mhm.
clairvoyance, clairsentience, channeling. I'm trying to like wrap this all together where if it's my goal or to maybe even be telekinetic or
Mhm.
electrokinetic, I think is the other word. Do I just communicate with my guides like, hey, I want to be telekinetic, or hey, I want to be clairvoyant, or hey, I want to open my channel. What do I need to do in this physical world to do that? Would they then just show us all the path and what you need to do in order to enable that ability within yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you're always being guided, and those gifts want to open, right? Those like it's available for everybody. Everybody's intuitive, and how that comes through is different for everybody. And I really believe in leaning into your natural strength. And so I feel the first place to start is just to learn about the different clairs and how they show up. So I don't know if you already talked about those in your podcast. I have YouTube videos that talk about the different clair senses and just how they show up. I also have podcasts about it, and that's really helpful because people will always listen to those and be like, wait, I didn't realize I am clairvoyant. Most people think clairvoyance is I'm seeing like ghosts walking around. And it's not like that.
Right.
It's like if you can visualize, guess what? Not everybody visualizes, right? If you can visualize, you're clairvoyant. If you can use your mind's eye when you're daydreaming, it's that same muscle. That's clairvoyance. It's in your mind's eye. People always think it's outside of them, or like a lot of what people think are their thoughts are actually their clairaudience. It sounds like you. It sounds like your own voice, right? And so, like, I think if any of those videos are helpful for you, you can check those out, or anybody else. But my point is just understand how those show up, because when you learn about them, you're going to realize, oh, I'm really clairsentient. Oh, I'm really clairvoyant. Like there's gonna be one or two that really stick out to you, and then I would recommend focusing on working with that more and developing that more and going into it and just starting to play with that and ask information and tune into that sense specifically and develop that skill, and really master that. And like over time, others will kind of naturally open up, but it's just like with anything else, you're always being guided, and you just need to know one step, the next step, and so instead of like, what people do is they'll be naturally really clairvoyant, and I need to open up my clear audience, and it's like, just get better at your clairvoyance, and like maybe then later the clairaudience will open up, and so I think just lean into whatever's strongest for you and start using it. And it's like any muscle, it's not going to get built unless you use it. So if you're not taking 5 to 10 minutes a day to like ask questions, tune in, receive information, and work with that sense, I'm not surprised it's not opening up. It's just like anything else. When I wanted to develop my gifts, I took time every single day to work with it. The same way, if I want to learn how to shoot a free throw, I'm going to shoot a basketball every day. So it really is as simple as that.
Yeah, it's the whole practice makes perfect kind of thing. And the
Hmm.
analogy that really opened my eyes to kind of what you're talking about, and you alluded to it, is the analogy of like if you're trying to drive from New York to San Diego, you only need to see 200 feet in front of you and you can get there. You don't
Hmm.
need to be able to visualize the entire road that takes you from New York to San Diego, right? And I don't know why, but that analogy just unlocked me like in so many different ways where it was like, holy shit, like, it's okay. Just see what the next step is. You can have this grandiose vision of making $10,000, making $100,000 in a month, but it's not that you are able to. It's not like you just wake up one morning and that happens. I mean, maybe for some people that do, if you get to that place, whatever. But it's like, what is the next step that I need to take to get to that, spot? What is it that I need to do to, like, what's the tweak I need to make in my podcast that unlocks the next level of viewership? What is you know what I mean? And so it's asking it's almost becoming in tune with asking the right questions that are going to be seeing 200 feet in front of your car.
100%. Whenever people try and plan too far ahead, it ends up messing it up anyway. Like, because energy shift, what you desire shifts as well as you're in that process. And I always tell people with manifestation, this is where it comes up. They're trying to understand, okay, this is what I want, and I'm not getting into any intuition about like how to get this. Like, how do I manifest this house, for example? I don't know, whatever. And they keep getting an intuitive nudge to go play guitar, and they're not listening to it. And I'm like, go play guitar. They're like, no, but I'm trying to manifest the house. I'm like, but what if you go play guitar and then you run into somebody who's selling their house and it's the house you want, right? And so, like, intuition isn't linear. It doesn't make sense to the logical mind because it can see the whole picture. You don't need to worry about that. Just worry about step one. And it is very much like, okay, I do step one, complete. Now the door opens and now I can see step two, right? And then you rinse and repeat. But you don't get step 10 until you do step one, then two, then three, then four, then five.
Right.
And people are waiting at step one for step 10 and they never move, And so this is where people hold themselves back really their whole lives, is they're waiting for step 10 and they haven't even done step one. And so you have to just focus on, whatever's coming through right now for you is really relevant because it is all connected, and it's like a big treasure hunt. You just go to the first place and that leads you to the next and then the next, and eventually you get to the treasure. But you have to be willing to, take that first step, even if it's in a direction that doesn't make sense to you.
Well, and it's so funny because this also reminds me of that movie we were just talking about, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Because again, it goes to those little micro things, like doing something so unpredictably random in this moment right now will jettison your life course onto something completely random in the future. And the next layer to this is, I would argue, because I can do this with my life, so I would argue anybody look back on their entire life and you will find those moments that we're talking about where maybe you did something that was more intuitive and now you're at where you're at today, that caused this ripple effect throughout your life. And what I think might be you're touching on is probably the shadow side of this whole manifestation culture that we're kind of wrapped into, where people are so focused on, and I'm probably guilty of this myself, so focused on that dollar amount, that house, that end goal, that you're taking your eyes off of those 2 feet in front of your car, 200 feet in front of your car. You're not realizing that this little podcast episode or doing this little thing, it could even be, and maybe I'm breaking it down too much, but it could even just be what you're about to eat for your next meal could shift you into a reality or timeline that it happens 10 times quicker or 10 times slower just based on your perception, which I don't know, maybe that could come across as a little too much, like a little too overbearing if it's too much pressure.
It's true though. I mean, it's honestly true though. I think about one of my closest friends. We always talk about how, like, the way we met, she like randomly sent an email to me asking if I wanted to meet her for coffee. She was like, I read your blog. Do you want to get coffee? And I used to get random messages like that like all the time. And I always just delete. I'm not reading a meeting a random person. I don't know what it was about her email. I was like, okay. And it's funny because she's like, that's the only time in my whole life I've ever sent a message like that to somebody. And I literally don't know why I went. It was so out of character for me. And I went and we got coffee and we just hit it off. And she was the person that like we fundamentally shifted each other's lives. Like, I got her like her full-time career that she's been in for years now. Like, I was the person that connected her with that position. A lot of stuff with her health history, with my health issues. She was the one that got me into spirituality, and she was the one that recommended me to she connected me to my Reiki master, and that original intuitive I saw. I just like all of these huge things that made me, right? I'm like, how would I have ended up here? Would I have? I don't know. Had I not answered that email.
It's so wild.
Because all of these people that were so fundamental to my life, and for her as well, like, I have certain friends where I'm like, I don't know if I didn't know you, would my life be like completely different. She is somebody where I'm like, I literally don't know what job I would be in. And she's the same way. And it's like, you just never know, where it's leading you. Or I always tell the story about, there was this day I said to my spirit guides, like, I want $10,000 like ASAP. And this is when I was still in like food blogging and stuff. And like later that day, I had to go to the grocery store, and my guides were like, go to this grocery store. I was like, I don't want to go over there. Like, it's far, and it was a store I didn't really like. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll go. So I go, and there's this guy there who is working for some like dairy-free ice cream company giving samples. And I walk up and I'm like, and he gives me some samples, and I'm chatting with him. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a food blogger. I'm super into like, like paleo food. And we're just chatting. He's like, give me your card. And I was like, sure, yeah, let's do something. And he emails me later, and he literally like offers me a $10,000 deal to work with the brand. And I was like, had I not gone to that store, I wouldn't have bumped into that guy, So it's like stuff like that happens all the time. And we can choose different timelines all the time. And your higher self is always whispering to you like where to go and how to make it easier and more exciting and more abundant. Like, you're always being guided there. You just have to
And
listen.
it comes back to the whole thing of, if you're doing the same thing and like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing yet expecting a different outcome. And all you had to
Mm-hmm.
do was go to a different grocery store, and it manifested
Yeah.
$10,000 was the outcome, which I mean, obviously don't people are going to be running to different grocery stores. But it's such an amazing, it's just an amazing testament to this movie, which I'm going to say a third time because I fucking loved it. I absolutely loved it. But also because it's like so true. It's like you have no idea what how what you're doing today is going to have this ripple effect. But what you do know is that if you do today exactly how you did yesterday, you do know exactly what's going to happen. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's like, yeah.
There's a line in my last book that just like I felt so called out. And they're basically like, miracles are available to you every day, but you can't plan for miracles. And I
Oh,
thought, shit, like that's the
oh.
problem, right? If when we're planning too much, it's like you don't plan for miracles. And so if you really want to live a life where you're just like in that miracle energy and receiving miracles, you are living in the unknown. You're living in the exploration and the curiosity and just following your intuition. But where you're overly planning it and you're just sticking to the plan, there's no space for the miracle to drop in.
I love that. And that's something, because that is something that and maybe it's clicking a lot more now, especially with this movie hitting me. But I think like that's something where I truly believe that miracles can happen every day. But I'm like, okay, where are they? But it's like, dude, look at your life. Like, you're doing the same thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a good thing to be said for routines. Like in the morning, like I get up, I meditate, I stretch, I either lift or go to jujitsu, I work on my podcast. But there has to be a level of randomness that we put into every day. So maybe that's a
Totally.
good question for you. Is there like time in your day that you allocate to doing something random?
Oh, all the time. So I talk about this a lot where it's like if I want, and this goes back to energy, right? So if I want new energy flowing in for me, I have to stay in the energy of newness all the time. And that's also the same thing with like for my intuition. Like I need to be in the energy of learning and learning information, receiving information I've never thought of before. So I'm building that muscle, and that's like a common thing for me because then I'm already in the energetic space when I'm tapping in to receive information I'm not expecting. Right. So I make sure I do that consistently. And with the energy of newness, it's like it can be as simple as like I am changing out my like coffee. Like I'm trying like a different coffee recipe, or I am going to brush my teeth with a different hand, or I'm going to, just like anywhere where I can do something different. It could be like maybe every time you like when you do lunges, right, at the gym, and maybe you always notice I always start with my right foot. Like start with your left foot. Like just do something little to be in the energy of new. Or for me, for example, like I mentioned before, I have my morning routine, and this is a perfect example of how we can have that masculine energy as a container, but then allow the feminine to flow. So I have like a structure for my morning routine, but I ask myself, is this really what feels good for me this morning? And sometimes I do the morning routine as I typically do, but other days I'm like, actually no, I actually just like want to fuck around for an hour, and so I just ask myself, is that really what I want? But then I also let myself flow within that. So like the first thing I do is I always go on a walk outside, and every day I walk in a different direction. I just like let the universe guide me wherever I want to go. So instead of walking the
Mm.
same loop or the same direction every single day, it's just too routine. I want to live in the energy of new, or for me, I like to pull an oracle card in the morning. I'll use a different deck every day. It could even be like just pulling out a different book and flipping to a random page just for the frequency of like I'm getting something new and different into my field. So I try and just find ways like that fit into the structure already, where I'm doing something a little bit different, or even like for me with my podcast, for example, that's something that I do twice a week. So I always try like different formats, different topics, like Q&A. We're trying channeling now. Like how can I spice up even just the way I interview? Like anything where I'm starting to feel like I've done this before, I get bored. So I'm like, how can I try something different? And I think food is a really easy way to do this, of just trying a different food. Maybe it's a new vegetable you can get your hands on, cook something in a new way. Like that's a really easy way where you're gonna have to eat anyway. So like try eating something different, or just doing it in a different way, or even a different order. So like if I'm going to do the same things, the same 5 things for my morning routine, I will change the order. So maybe some days first I journal and then I go on a walk. Other days I immediately go on a walk and then I meditate. I just will like rearrange things, and that helps me keep the energy of newness as well. So just like little things like that, I find just really help me stay in that energy of new.
I love that. I'm gonna have to start doing that more frequently. And I think something that also resonates me a lot more about that is, something about new is it can be scary for people, because if you're,
Hmm.
you're so comfortable in the same routine going over and over, and maybe even walking a different direction could be so scary for some people that it's just like it's closing in. It's making it
Hmm.
difficult. And so just doing something little or fun, like switching the hand you brush your teeth with, or maybe you pick up the cup with a different hand. It's like that
Hmm.
small little cascade effect could have this huge ripple down the line, where now you're able to completely uproot your house, or you're living in different houses every single day. And, you get an Airbnb in this city or that city, you're in a different country, you're in, and it all started with you just taking a drink of water with your left hand.
Yeah, totally. Because you're getting comfortable doing things that are different. Right. And so now that's your norm. Oh, yeah, I do that every day. So now, like, when a new thing comes in, it's not a scary thing. It's like, yeah, why not? Let's just try it out, and you're living in that frequency. So you're going to attract more of that into you. Right. So that's where you attract in new opportunities as well. Right. And it's just anywhere where you can. I mean, even to like, I don't know, I have friends where it's like every week we're going to go to this restaurant. Well, what if like right before we got dinner, we're just like, where do we want to eat right now? And we just like let it drop in and we tried something totally different. Or, you just walk down the street and you pick a random place that you haven't been before. All of those little things really do add up, because we're starting to peel away all of those illusions of fear around just doing something different. I always joke, I have an older sister and we're very different. And we always joke because like we would have restaurants we go to as a family, and I every single time I go to the same restaurant I get something different. Every single time. I've always been like that. And she always would order the same thing. Exact same thing every time. And we always joke. I'm like, this is like the classic example of how different our personalities are. And she's like, "Well, I already know I love this, so why would I risk ordering something different if I don't like it?" And I'm like, but what if in always ordering that same thing, you're missing out on the best thing on the menu? Like you're never going to know until you try it all. And I think that that's just such a great example of like such different ways of thinking,
Hmm.
and for me, it's like, but if it's not this, what if it's something better? And I don't want to unintentionally limit myself.
And it's just a new experience, right? Because
Hmm.
this invites the question of better and worse. Some things could be better, some things could be worse, but it's all based on your perception of how it's better or how it's worse, right? So
Hmm. 100%.
being better to someone could be worse to something else. And so
Hmm.
it's, I mean, maybe that's a little deep if people are just getting into this idea of new versus old, but but
Yeah.
man, I really,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it starts to peel apart, like, again, like, why is something better or why is something worse? And this Teal and I just did we did a channeling podcast, and she was like, well, like, I feel like I asked what to do, and I got led down this path of struggle, and I wanted a better path. And they said, well, but what if that was the better path? Why are you deciding that struggle is bad?
Right.
And she was just like, ugh. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just, really, really just inviting us to release the labels of better, worse, good, or bad, and just see things from different perspectives. And there's a lot of freedom in that, because you realize, like, places where you feel stuck, maybe you really just needed to shift your perception, and nothing actually has to change. It's just your viewpoint of it.
Well, and that's even another aspect of it, right? Is like if you walk around in the same circle every single day, right? It's your walk, you go out your house, you make a left-hand turn, you go around the block, you come home. There's a level of it too where you're not even going to start looking for the newness. Like
Hmm.
you're not even going to notice unless like a house got taken down, you're not even going to notice it unless there's like orange cones, out in front of it or something. So even maybe trying to appreciate, even if you're walking the same circle, like, maybe it's trying to appreciate something different about it, or maybe you zigzag or walk on the other side of the street, and it's giving you that different perspective as well,
Hmm.
which is, I guess, also an amazing thing about newness, because there's a really cool, GIF on Instagram that's been circling around where it's this like ball spinning on it's like a ball spinning on a plane, but then the plane
Mm,
starts shifting and you see the ball spinning in a different direction and it
yeah.
keeps shifting. And it's like, your perception doesn't show you the entirety of
Hmm.
everything. And to me, it's a beautiful diagram because it really hits home on the logical side, especially like
Hmm.
science minded people who, might be trying to shift into the intuition or perception idea of stuff, or anyone who says,
Hmm.
oh, believe the science kind of deal, that would shift them to being like, shit, like, perception it's different. It's different for everybody. So how do I even know? And this is something that trips me out, is like, how do I even know that I'm quote unquote good? Like, how do I know I'm doing good? You know?
I mean, you don't. But it's like, is that
Yeah.
the point? Like what is good? Like, to me, good relates to like somebody else's judgment. It's like
Sure.
I'm looking for validation. It's like, is that the goal though? To be good? I mean, if that's the goal, we're gonna be living in like that like good girl, good boy paradigm forever. And again, that's just like giving your power away. It's like, well, who decided? It's like the term professional. Well, who decided what's professional? Old white men? I don't know, right? Like, well, maybe that's not what I want. Maybe
Yeah.
that's not what I want, And so to me, it's like, am I living my joy? Am I living my truth? And with like, it's also just this shift again, just to being, I mean, traveling to consciousness, like living consciously. And when you drive the same road every day, it becomes this thing where you get there and you're like, I don't even remember driving here, right? Like, I was like
Yeah.
zoned out. I was zoned out, and people do that in their lives
You're in your
all the
head.
time,
You're in your head.
And
You're
so yeah,
living in a world of make believe.
exactly. And it's about bringing like mindfulness all day long. I don't really like traditionally meditate. Like, I'm just always like I'm aware. I'm just aware, and I'm always talking to my guides, and it's just like a constant thing. I don't need to like get into some separate space of meditation. It's like, it's to be aware, to be mindful your whole day through. And that really shifts everything. That's where you see the opportunities. That's where you notice different places that you wouldn't have seen before, and that's where your life really shifts. And so we have to make a change to get a change.
Right. It's the smallest thing. Something I do want to bring back up, and this question has been poking me since we talked about the animals, and it comes back to morality and doing the good or bad thing, is you were talking about how you won't like take on other people's energies, like, because there's a line of them needing to tell you. Now, it feels like though that you don't extend that out to animals, where, and I'm kind of being tongue in cheek about this, but it's kind of I think there's a question here somewhere where it's like, you don't it, so you're allowing it seems like your morality line was drawn at accessing humans akashic records or their soul, based on whether or not they give you allowance to it. And like, even with my
Mhm.
dog, you said, okay, are you giving me permission for my dog?
Mhm.
So so I guess there's a line of morality, and I guess the question's a little tongue in cheek, but I want to ask it anyhow. It's like, you know you don't see it as impeding the animals by channeling what their energy is telling you then.
Well, I'm not. So if I'm gonna like give energy healing to a pet, for example, like the first point of reference is I'm gonna ask the owner, right? Do I have your permission? And then I'm gonna ask the animal, and the animal has to give me their permission.
Oh.
In that exchange, right then, I wasn't like reading like the animals like records. And I wasn't doing energy work. I was just communicating. So it's like, I don't know, is it immoral for me to just like walk up to you on the street and be like, hey, are you okay here?
Yeah.
That was just like communication. So if I was going to give her energy work or something like that, I would first ask you. And if it's a good for you, then I just ask her. I would communicate, do I have permission? And if she said yes, then I would do it. And animals often will very readily give permission. I mean, I like often animals will just like run up to a healer. If somebody does energy work, it's really common for the animal to just come up to you or like sit on your lap. I mean, I've seen dogs just like walk right up and they'll just lay on their stomachs, like ready, right? Or the cat will just like jump on my lap, and someone will be like, that cat never talks to you. I'm like, yeah, she wants healing, right? Like they just typically know, and then you can just ask. So that's different than just like, it's the difference between communication and like reading somebody's records and like getting into personal information.
Gotcha. And they're already tuned into it. They want it. Have you ever had an
Yeah.
animal? Have you ever had an animal say no, fuck off?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they
Yeah.
stubborn
Not
or?
all animals want it. Yeah, I mean, and there's like a resonance thing, not all animals like me. Uh, the same way
Can't shoot
like
100%.
not all like, I don't know, there are certain healers, for example, that like I don't resonate with. Doesn't mean they're bad people. I just like, know who I relate to. I think it's really important with people that you work with. It's like got to be somebody that you vibe with personally.
Right.
I don't take offense to that, but to be honest, a lot of dogs don't really like me. I do, because I have really strong cat energy. Like I have like really strong cat energy, and so a lot of dogs don't like me. Dogs, this is what's funny. Dogs that like cats usually like me. And cats love me, but there's something about dogs. This has been since I was a child.
Really?
Dogs will just like, I've always been really aggressive with me. Um, or they love me if they like cats. So it's fun. It's just funny because usually animals really love like energy workers, but I have this thing with certain dogs, and it's always the dogs that don't like cats. So yeah, I just like a strong cat
That's
energy.
interesting.
But yeah, animals are, and they also just know, animals like to do energy work on an animal is a lot faster. Like it can literally take like 2 or 3 minutes versus like what would you could spend like 45 minutes with a human. They're just much more receptive, open. It doesn't take as long, and they're more sensitive to the energy. So they don't usually need much, and usually the animal just guides it. Like often if the animal like lays down and is like, hey, I'm ready, and you just start sending, the animal will just get up and leave when it's done. Like it just knows. So it's just kind of a different experience.
That's so
But
cool.
animals aren't I have worked with animals, but they're not my area of expertise like at all. Like there are a lot of like animal mediums and people who specialize in that. That's not my specialty. So I just want to be clear about that. But yeah,
A little
that's been
asterisk.
my experience.
Give the
Yeah.
disclaimers.
Yeah.
Well, so
Yeah.
then what about animals in nature? Have you ever like gone outside and talked to birds and asked them to like sit on your lap or like, squirrels?
I mean, I don't ask animals to sit on my lap, but but yeah, I'll talk to animals sometimes. I mean, not it's like, not everybody wants to talk to me all the time. But yeah, I'll definitely talk. I mean, I talk to trees, I talk to everything. So you can talk to the animals, but they don't all have like interesting things to say. And honestly, there's a lot of animals that are kind of messed up. Like just with like eating more like not natural food, like the food that people feed them, and a lot of what's going on with like the 5G and what's being pumped, just
Sure.
the water supply, what's happening in nature, and that's really kind of messing with their energy and I'll say consciousness, like it just so think about that. I mean, like the other day I walked up, there was this little puppy and it looked lost, and I like walked up closer. I tend to save dogs a lot. uh, and I walked up closer and I was like, and I get close and I look at it was rabid. It was like totally rabid. I was like, yeah, I can't. And it was like, yeah,
Damn.
it was scary. So I like walk away, so it's just like, it's not always, I don't know, the same way I don't necessarily want to talk to everybody that I walk by on the street.
Sure. Yeah, no, fair enough. That's a great analogy.
So yeah, it's just communication. But yeah, animals are a whole other thing.
I find it wild too because I'm just listening here and just taking everything you in like it's real. I mean, I believe you, but just I look at it from perspective. If it was me, hell, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'd have been like, if I turned on this podcast, it'd be like, Christina's insane, I'm out, Clayton's insane. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought that probably 5 years ago too, but now I'm just like, I don't know. I don't really worry about that kind of thing because anybody who really knows me, like, I'm pretty grounded, and I tend to be somebody that gets people into spirituality because most people, they meet me and they get to know me and they have no idea what I do. And then when they find out, they're like more open to it because usually people get to know me in more of a business context. So they just talk to me and
mm,
you can tell I'm like not off my rocker.
yeah.
And then it's like, actually, this is my angle. Like, this is what I do. And so, most people like are more receptive to it and how you express it. And with people in my life, like, there have been, I don't know, I'll make a joke and I'm like, why would I shut down like multiple like 7-figure businesses and a top podcast that was very like successful and all these other things to pursue something that I was making up? It's not like I like didn't I was struggling and like wanted attention and wasn't succeeding, and so I'm like, what can I do to like bring attention to it? It was like I was doing great. Like I was
Yeah.
like I thought I was living my best life, and I was like, wow, I got to shut all this down and like restart and really go after like what's true for me. And it's like I'm like, why would I put myself in that position, really? And there's just the logic to it. But um yeah, I don't really worry about that. I find people that push away spirituality typically are pushing away an experience they've had, because I stand by this. I can talk to anybody, and we can connect on either their own psychic experiences or like a spiritual experience. Like, everybody, everybody.
Yeah.
And um a lot of the people who have given me a lot of resistance or pushback, like every single time it comes back around and they reveal that they had some big spiritual experience, or they get prophetic dreams every night or whatever it is, right? Because everybody has spiritual experiences and they've just been pushing it away and resisting it and scared of it. And so they're going to push me away and resist that too. And the other thing is, a lot of people feel uncomfortable with somebody being able to see things about themselves that they don't want to face,
Mm.
and I had one of my best friends. This is so funny. I didn't even find this out until a couple of months ago, but she said, like, when we first met, she came in for a session, and after that, I didn't see her for a year. And then she came in for a second session, and after that second session, like, she was in my sphere, and then we became really good friends. And she was like, I didn't talk to you for a year because I was so triggered by you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, well, I was upset because I didn't like the idea of you. And like, she came in for a session, right? She wanted a reading. She was like, I was so shook because I didn't like the idea of somebody knowing more about me than I knew about me. And I
Yeah.
had to really sit with that for a year.
Wow.
And so I
Wow.
was like, whoa, right? Um so it goes back to how comfortable are we with truth. And I find that often people who avoid me or push me away are afraid of seeing truth, whether that's in themselves or just in the world. Not that I'm saying everybody's truth, but I tend to just reflect things for people, right?
Well, and I mean, even at a smaller level, I've noticed that in my life where, if I'm operating from a lower frequency of any sort, and as I started my, let's say, ascension more towards light, more towards joy, more towards love, it did have this effect of people pushing back. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I remember, I think I had the greatest week of my life. I forget what, it was just this breakthrough week. I was figuring shit out. I think there was a toxic girl in my life that I cut out. I was so happy. I remember my roommate even commented on it. He was like, dude, this is the happiest I've ever seen you. there was another kid in our friend group who was like, who's not in the best place, who pushed back on it. It was like, what did I say? I said something, but kind of to the like, I don't remember exactly what it was. I said something, and it got taken across as me being on my high horse. Like, it's time for me to come down off my high horse. Like, your reign of something is over.
Yeah.
And it's really wild because to me that shook me. Like, that really shook me. Like, it was the pendulum. I had such a great week, and then I had a bad week after that, because I'm thinking to myself, like, what the fuck? Like, I'm happy. Me being this empath, I could see him hurting because of me being happy, and being so confused as to, like, what just happened? Like, I'm happy. Like, how does he not see that I'm actually happy? And that's where I had this huge realization of, oh shit, like, it's that mirror. It's like, here's where you could be, but I'm mirroring back to you your own insecurities that you have been pushing away and running from and hiding from. And, it really gave me this lens into understanding, that psychology. I conceptualize it now as, well, if I'm operating from an energy of love, I can see all the energies underneath me. I can see if someone's throwing shame at me. I can see if someone's throwing guilt at me. I can see if it's anger. I can feel it because I am so much I am now aware. I'm now in alignment with love. So I can see all the frequencies below me and how it reciprocates in me. And, that was obviously a part of the journey, but, I feel like there's a huge parallel there, that once you start doing the work, once you start transcending these lower vibrational frequencies, the people that you have brought or attracted in those frequencies will start to, crab bucket mentality, pull you down and keep you in that frequency.
100%. I mean, it's the mirroring, it's the I'm comfortable with you here, and now you're raising your frequency, and I can feel that vibrational gap between us, and I don't like that. So come back down. And a lot of that can come from fear of losing you, right? It can come from fear. It's like it's different now, and people can feel that vibrational shift. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, come back here, right? And so there's the mirroring aspect, there's the fear of losing somebody, it's the
Uncomfortable.
fear of change. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. And think about that. Like, if you were previously at the same vibration and now you've shifted your vibration, now that person is forced to see the frequency they're at.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before, there was no contrast, so they weren't able to see it.
Right.
So there are so many different factors going on there. And I always tell people, it's like, if you're going to make any big life transformation or shift, or like really dedicate yourself to living in highest alignment, be prepared for pushback. I'm not saying there's going to be, but like, it's pretty uncommon for there not to be any type of friction, because people feel that vibrational shift. And in fact, like, if you are on a path of growth and expansion and raising your vibration, and you're not noticing that anything is shifting, like all of the relationships are the same, everything with career is the same, like everything is the same, then are you really shifting your vibration? Because it doesn't really make sense, right? Like, as you change your frequency, what's going to be in alignment for you is going to change. So it only makes sense, right? So
Right.
there's going to be some of that friction. But yeah, well, I need to jump
Oh,
off.
wow. Damn. Yeah, that got late real quick. Well, two things. One, Christina, thank you so much. Deeply appreciate it. This is incredible.
Thanks for having me. So
I
fun.
love, first of all, this is also the longest podcast to date, so round of applause for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did
You
it.
did it. We were worried, but we made it.
Yeah, I made
Yeah,
it. I love it.
do you want to, I usually leave this time for my guests, if you want to address the audience, tell them anything, words of encouragement, plug yourself, whatever you're feeling called to tell them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if anything I said resonates with anyone here, I'd love to connect further. And you can find me everywhere at Christina the Channel, Instagram, YouTube. My website is christinathechannel.com. My podcast is called Christina the Channel. So I'm pretty easy to find. And my book is called Manifestation Mastery: How to Shift Your Reality and Co-Create with the Universe. I highly recommend picking up a copy because it will totally shift your life and you really have nothing to lose. I really believe in it. So if you resonate with anything that I said, I definitely recommend checking out the book. You can just search it on Amazon and find it there. And yeah, it was just great to chat with you, and just an honor to be here. So thank you.
It's a pleasure. And I think I'm gonna have to check out your book. I'm gonna have to pick up a copy myself because
You should.
yeah,
I think you love it.
yeah, there's a lot in there. I can already feel it.
Yeah.
And I'm also gonna grab your links. So whichever links you want me to throw in the show notes, guys, feel free to click our stuff down there as well. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. This is the longest one to date. So if you made it to the end, pat yourself on the back because thank you. And with that being said, conscious monkeys, if you didn't grow in this, I'll be surprised. So with that being said, let's continue to grow together.